Hey, it's me, Vicky Marie. Um, um, we're carrying on with the sentencing of Axel Rudakubana. I just need to I just need to warn everybody. These details that have been coming out so far are really, really distressing. So that's why I've turned my camera off, because I've already been crying as I've been listening to everything. It is horrendous, horrific. What this boy, man, whatever has done is evil beyond evil. So I just want to warn you, if you're going to watch this, you know, uh, we're going to go through the things that have been said so far. Then the judge will be taking a break, I believe, before the sentencing. But in this time now, building up to that, we'll go through what's been said so far. And I just have to warn you, it's absolutely horrendous. It's even worse than you could imagine. It was bad enough, whatever you could imagine. This boy is possessed by the devil or something. It's beyond. He's taken a delight in this. It's beyond sort of mental health issues. It's not terrorism. I think they're completely right to say it's not terrorism in the sense that we think of terrorism. That it's for a cause or for Islam. It's nothing to do with that. This boy, this man, he's evil. He's possessed, he's evil, obsessed with killing. He didn't care. He targeted these little girls. He didn't care anything about them at all. It's much more, I think, than we thought it was, or we realized it was. So I'm going to go through the blog. In fact, we might start off watching a little bit of Sky News. If you're feeling sad, Angel, you may not be able to watch. I mean, it is horrible. I'm sorry you're feeling sad. But having said that, although it's horrible, this story has got to be told, because this is going to have an effect on the sentencing. I personally, now, after what I've read so far, this boy should never come out. Never, ever come out. Maybe the judge will go for a whole life tariff once he's listened to all the different things that are being said. Maybe he will go for a whole life tariff. We'll see. But it's horrible. More horrible than you could even imagine. So just a warning, if you find that it's upsetting you too much, as I say, I've had to actually turn the camera off, because if you saw, I'm just covered in mascara at the moment. It's all just, I've been crying just while I've been watching it in the interim, in this brief period while I wasn't doing a video, reading the blogs, etc. Anyway, let's hear what they've got to say on Sky News just for a moment. But I want to go through all the events.
At the moment, we understand that the courtroom are going through CCTV footage and dash cam footage of the events leading up to the attack on that dance class in Southport. While we wait for more updates from inside the courtroom, I want to bring you an interview I did a little bit earlier on. It's with the editor.
Okay, we won't watch that interview because we've seen that before. Now, this reporter, Sarah Jane Mee, I think she was crying earlier. She's got young children. It's very difficult not to cry. So we're going to go to the BBC blog, and this starts earlier on. As I say, please take the trigger warning. Please, if you don't think you can cope with this, it's probably better that you don't watch it. So this started off the BBC blog at 12:59, where the prosecution team was speaking, and she started by naming all of the people who Rudakubana had pled guilty to murdering and attempting to murder. She said she will open with the facts of the case and then pause and allow people to leave the room if they want to. She knew. She knows how distressing it is, because don't forget, it's distressing enough for us. Imagine if it was your own little children. I mean, it just does not bear thinking about. These are evil. That's evil. It's like possession. If you believe in possession or you don't, but this boy was possessed. And that was evil that walked into that dance workshop that day. So the prosecution told the court that on the 29th of July 2024, the defendant carried out a premeditated planned knife attack on multiple victims, principally young girls, intending to kill them. 3 children were killed, 2 of whom suffered particularly horrific injuries, which are difficult to explain as anything other than sadistic in nature. So these TV stations, they don't even want to actually say what the injuries were because they were that horrific. You know, it wasn't just a question of, you know, it was overkill, it was sadism. Killing's bad enough, but you know, these injuries that we're not getting the details of, which is probably for the best, were horrific in nature. And the defendant attempted to kill 10 others, inflicting a number of stab wounds upon them, including to their backs as they tried to escape. So these little girls were running away. They were running away from this devil. And he is a devil. And they were running away from him, and he was stabbing them in the back. When his home was searched following his arrest, a number of weapons were recovered, including the biological toxin ricin, which the defendant had produced in his bedroom. Then it turns out that just after the attacks, Axel Rudakuna told the police he was glad that the children had died. So Diana Hare KC, leading the prosecution, now says that having researched atrocities committed by others, so Axel had been researching all sorts of atrocities. Hi Angel, hi Craig, hi BF, hi ACW. So you can see why it wasn't classed as, I mean, it is terror, obviously, but they couldn't link him to one particular group because really he was just obsessed with any kind of horrible attacks, sadism, genocide, you name it. He was interested in it. He didn't have a cause. You know, even in his own mind, we might not agree with terrorist causes, but they normally have their cause. They normally have a reason that they do things. He didn't have a reason. There is no evidence that he ascribed to any particular political or religious ideology. He was not fighting for a cause. His only purpose was to kill, and he targeted the youngest, most vulnerable in order to spread the greatest level of fear and outrage, which he succeeded in doing. And when he was under arrest at the police station after the incident, he was heard to say, "It's a good thing those children are dead. I'm so glad, so happy." Now, so there was some talk before this that the reason that the hearing was delayed was because he was taken to hospital in the middle of the night. Now they're saying, the police are saying, no, he was not taken to hospital. But I wonder if he received some sort of medical attention, maybe in the prison itself, maybe not. He didn't have to go to the hospital. He probably had a panic attack or was pretending he was having a panic attack. It's easy to pretend, you know, Anyway, while he's in the courtroom after so this was reported earlier this morning, while he was in the courtroom after at 1 o'clock, this was, after refusing to speak, you know, most of the time, he's in the court, he can't face these families. He is a coward. He is a coward, he's a devil. He's horrible. He's the most horrible because he's showing no remorse instead of trying to make it maybe a little bit easier for the families. I mean, he pled guilty. That's the only thing that he's done. But, you know, he doesn't want to hear these victim impact statements. He doesn't want to face the consequences of what he's done. So apparently he's in the courtroom and he was shouting, "I need a paramedic because I feel ill." Oh my God, your heart bleeding for him. He feels ill. All those little girls that were running away from him, and he dragged them back and stabbed them in the back. And he now needs a paramedic because he feels ill. Mr. Justice Goose, the judge, says Rudakubana has been seen by medical practitioners and he is fit to attend. This judge doesn't put up with much shit, does he? Thank God. And he adds, "I want this hearing to continue." And Stan Ray's KC, Rudakubana's lawyer, I know he has to have a lawyer, but fucking hell, you'd think, sorry, excuse my French, you'd really won the lottery if you got assigned to be his lawyer. What are you supposed to do to try and defend this horrible, horrible person? What the fuck are you supposed to do? And nobody cares about him, and they didn't care about him before, and that, well, his parents maybe still care about him, but I bet they're struggling. But now, after hearing all this today, nobody will give a shit about him anymore, if they ever did in the first place. So he tells the court that those at prison were concerned about his well-being. Oh, diddums. And that the defendant hadn't eaten or drunk for some time. Oh, yeah, well, these three little girls haven't either. Ray said he spoke to Rudakubana this morning and he said he was well enough, but he thinks he might have deteriorated and will take instructions. He goes to the doc to speak with the defendant. Well, you just can't face it. That's what it comes down to. He's suffering from cowarditis. He's not got an illness. There's nothing wrong with him. He's just cannot. But the only thing I will say is maybe now Rudakubana is starting to face up to his actions. I think probably when he did it, he was like, you know, on a totally different, maybe suffering from psychosis, though they say he wasn't, say he hasn't got mental health issues. Now, after this spell in prison and it's all coming home to him, maybe he is seeing some consequences. Well, what he needs to do is get down on his fucking knees and apologise to these families. Anyway, so then he started shouting, "I can't continue, my chest hurts." And he was removed from the dock because Rees, his lawyer, told the court that his client, Rudakubana, was complaining of chest pains and wants to see a paramedic. Fucking hell, sorry. Oh, God, sorry, you're going to have to be prepared for bad language. So he's suffering from chest pains. He stabbed those little girls in the chest, in the back, everywhere, you know, really brutal injuries. And he's got chest pains. I could not give a shit, to be honest. So the judge says he's going to continue and there'll be a break later. But Rudakubana shouts, "I can't continue with this." And the prosecution tries to carry on speaking, but he is shouting above her, "My chest is hurting." The judge replies, "Shouting from the dock is not going to make this happen any quicker. If you remain quiet, you'll be able to see someone." And then he replies, "I'm not going to remain quiet. I am in pain." God. Oh. Anyway, then Mr. Justice Goose said, "You've chosen this moment to say this. These proceedings are being conducted under my control, Mr. Rudakubana. Do you understand? Not yours. Good for you. Good." Do you know what? All this fucking pussyfooting around people who say they've got mental illnesses or say they've got this or they've got anxiety or they've got this or they've got that, and then do these terrible things. I know people suffer from anxiety. When I was young, I suffered from anxiety most of my sort of teenage years and right up to probably when I was in my 30s. I know what it feels like to have anxiety, but you don't use it as an excuse to murder little children. Anyway, he continued to yell, so the judge asked security to use force. He was taken out of the dock to a side room so that it could continue. He just didn't want to be there and listen to the truth of his actions. So then the prosecutor continued to open the facts of the case. She said that on the 7th of July 2024, Leanne Lucas posted an advert for the Taylor Swift yoga and dance workshop on Instagram. It announced that the event was intended for children in school years 2 to 6, ages 6 to 11, and would take place at the Heart Space on the 29th of July. He must have looked for this, mustn't he? How has he even found that? How did he even know that was going on? He was looking for something, that he was specifically looking to attack children because they're easy targets. By the 18th of July, it had sold out, she tells the court. And then she continues saying that Rudakubana lived at 10 Old School Close, about 5 miles away from the Heart Space with his parents. At about 11:10, he left his address on foot. He had with him a kitchen knife with a 20-centimetre long blade manufactured by Apollo Thurbera. It was one of 2 identical knives he had purchased from Amazon on the 13th of July 2024, taking steps to hide his identity when he did so by using a VPN. Now, how are they going to get around that if they're trying to bring in these new restrictions on Amazon or whatever? How are they going to get around people using VPNs? Anyway, evidence obtained from his laptop computer shows that shortly before leaving, he deleted his internet browsing history. So he was planning it. He was planning it, wasn't he? He's deleted his, of course they can get his browsing history up. These people, they think they're they're so clever, like Stefan Stearns or any of these criminal masterminds that actually aren't. Do they really not understand that deleting your browsing history might hide it from someone who's not technological at all? Do they not realize that the police can access it anyway? Are they stupid? Anyway, he then ordered a taxi to the scene of the killings under a fake name. And apparently at 11:04 on that day, he used this tablet to carry out a search on X for Marie Emmanuel's stabbing. Now, we did cover that. Do you remember that? That was the stabbing in was it a synagogue or a mosque in Sydney in Australia, where there was this sort of, they followed that stabbing at the stabbings at the commercial centre. Anyway, when the same search term was entered by a police officer during this investigation, he found it led to posts containing footage of the stabbing of Bishop Emmanuel and 5 others during a sermon at a church in Sydney in April 2024. The defendant then booked a taxi to collect him and take him to 34A Hart Street, the address of the Heart Space where the event was taking place. The booking was made in the name Simon. I wonder why I chose Simon. There's normally a reason for things. Anyway, the taxi was fitted with a dash cam. The footage shows that the defendant remained silent during the journey. And on arrival at Hart Street, he asked the driver to direct him to 34A before leaving the vehicle without paying, prompting the driver to follow him, making repeated requests for payment which were ignored. Consequently, there is dashcam footage of his subsequent movements. Rudakubana initially walked towards Master's vehicle body repairs, located next door to the Heart Space. Its owner, Colin Parry, was outside speaking to a customer when he saw the defendant. He told the defendant he needed to pay the taxi driver, but the defendant responded saying, "What are you going to do about it?" And then he turned and made his way next door. You know, I feel for these people because they didn't know what was going to happen. They probably feel a little bit guilty, I reckon now. You'd feel guilty that you hadn't stopped him, but they had no idea what he was going to do, of course. Now, we're coming to the bit now of the attacks themselves. So these are the especially upsetting bits, just to let you know. Here, leading the prosecution now tells the court about the moments after the defendant entered the dance studio. Without saying a word, he grabbed the child nearest to him from behind and put his arm around her, she tells the court. At first, Leanne Lucas, the instructor, thought he was there to collect her, but he then moved on to a second child and then a third, Alice da Silva Aguiar. Here describes how the defendant moved quickly through the room and didn't say anything, and it was only when he reached her and she felt a knife go into her back, that was only when she realised she'd been stabbed and what was happening. So that's when she realised he was armed and stabbing them. Then the CCTV, I've seen some of this CCTV. It's very distressing. It came up on X, you know, at the time when it was happening. Somebody, I don't know, it's CCTV, but somebody was videoing this. The videos came out on social media. You know what it's like on X. Before you're just scrolling down, next minute you've got the graphic details. So the instructor recalls children running down the stairs, and she followed them into the car park, calling 999 as she did so. Once outside, she told them, "Run away, run away." One of the girls ran towards the toilet on the landing at the top of the stairs. Fellow teacher Heidi Liddell followed her inside, locked the door and braced her foot against it. She told the girl to remain very quiet and not to make a sound. And then when this is very upsetting. When she heard voices outside the toilet door crying for the defendant to stop, she realised that not all the children had managed to escape. A mother was waiting to collect her daughter. She was sitting in her car in the car park when she heard screaming and saw people running from the building. She managed to grab her daughter and get her into the car. 3 other children also got into her vehicle. Alice da Silva Aguiar collapsed by the side of the vehicle, badly injured. And at 11:46, CCTV footage shows a child trying to leave the building, only to be pulled back inside by the defendant. She is subsequently seen stumbling from the building and collapsing outside. Now, that particular child did survive by some miracle. I don't know how. Anyway, then the court heard how an onlooker tried to help but was attacked. So imagine the parents having to watch this, listen to this. The prosecution now shifts to tell the court about Jonathan Hayes, who worked in an office across the landing from the dance studio. Here says, Hayes heard screaming, and when he looked out of his window, he saw some children running across the car park. When a colleague shouted that a child was bleeding in the car park, Hayes went to try and help. As he walked onto the landing, however, he saw the body of a child lying motionless on the floor. That is likely to have been B.B. King, here says. Crouching over her was the defendant, who then began to approach him, following him into his office as he retreated. She goes on, the defendant swiped at him with a knife which he tried to grab, and Hayes was stabbed in the leg during the confrontation and subsequently fell to the ground. Then at 1:30, they heard that witnesses screamed as they helped police retrieve injured children. Marcin Tyjon and Joel Verity were driving along Hart Street when they saw a group of children running across the road and a woman, Leanne Lucas, covered in blood. She was screaming that someone was stabbing the kids, the court hears, and Verity could see she was injured and that there was a child lying on the ground further up the road. Sorry, I'm just keeping an eye on Sky News just in case. I think they're having a break now. So we're, going over what we missed from earlier. But I think they're having a break now, but later it'll be the judge's actual sentence. So he picked up Alice da Silva Aguirre and took her out into the street. Marcin Tyjon, or Tyjon, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, then tried to help her, administering CPR on the instructions of a 999 operator. He returned and ran into the building and up the stairs, but he retreated when he saw the defendant pacing on the landing, holding a large knife. An officer arrived at 11:57 to find a large crowd of people in a state of panic. Verity entered the premises. Accompanied by another officer who had his taser drawn. Sorry, I just have to give you a warning here because it's horrible. So, at the top of the stairs, they found the defendant standing over the body of B.B. King, who had visible and severe stab injuries. He was holding a large blooded kitchen knife, which he dropped when he was told to do so. I wonder why he dropped it when he was told to. He didn't want to be tasered. He's a coward, isn't he? Verity, who had followed the police into the building, picked up B.B. King and carried her out of the building, screaming as he did so. I think this might... So, and then at 13:32, there was a pause in court before distressing evidence was shown. How it was described, how Police Sergeant Gillespie found the body of Elsie Stanker. Soon afterwards, Heidi Liddell and another person were found hiding in the toilet, crying with fear and relief. They were escorted from the building. Here pauses to give those who wish to do so the chance to leave the court, as evidence is about to be presented, which she says may be distressing. The court is first shown a CCTV screenshot of Rudakubana indicating what he was wearing that day, which was a green hoodie and a face mask. The dashcam footage of the taxi that drove Axel Rudakuna to the dance studio shows him trying to get into the ground floor through a locked door. He then finds an adjacent open doorway to the stairwell, leading to the room where the children were, and walks up the stairs. Now, he just walked into that dance studio, and it should have been out. You shouldn't have to live in, locked rooms, and it's going to end up like in America, isn't it, with the schools being sort of locked down and bloody, what do you call it? Anybody having to go? Are we going to have to really go through security to get in anywhere? For God's sake, it's just awful, isn't it? Because of these people who do these horrible things, everybody else has got to live in this prison. ourselves, because we can't be free and easy about going to places, or you got to worry, have we got to go through security systems, before you can even go to a bloody dance workshop. It's ridiculous. But this man, he just walked in. He just walked in and started killing those children because, nobody was expecting that. How would you expect it? But it turns out this man something should have been done about him. There were more red flags with Axel Rudakubana since the age of 13. How many more red flags could you have? And if nothing could be done with all those red flags, you've got no chance with people that just snap one day. He didn't just snap one day. He'd been snapping since he was 13 years old. He'd been snapping for for 4 years. He was under the attention of mental health agencies. The school was warned against him because his parents knew about him. The police had been rang. Prevent had been contacted. What more can you do? So he just got out that taxi and walked up the stairs, just walked in and started murdering children. So CCTV is all well and good, but it doesn't stop things happening. At the moment, I think a lot of places are being governed in retrospect, aren't they? CCTV is good because afterwards you can look back over CCTV and it often ends in cases being solved, but it doesn't protect anybody. It doesn't matter if you've got CCTV, it won't stop someone walking up to you and stabbing you. All it'll mean is that they'll probably be caught afterwards, but you'll still be dead. The CCTV doesn't prevent murder or prevent harm. It just helps the perpetrator be caught afterwards. So CCTV shows children fleeing from the building, and seconds later, very loud screams can be heard. Footage shows one girl leaving the building and being pulled back in by Rudakubana, but she survived. Thank you, God, that she survived. The court is again pausing so that people can leave, amid a warning that they will see images of wounded children, including Alice da Silva Aguiar. So then they heard, taser, taser, CCTV of police arrival shown. Sobs can be heard in the courtroom. It just must be awful for the children's families. As CCTV clips continue to be shown, a further clip shows another child staggering in the street before she collapses. She is helped by a member of the public and survived the attack. Well, do you know what? They might have survived that, they weren't killed, but they've got their life to cope ahead of them, to cope with this trauma that this man inflicted on them. Haven't they? Well, I presume they're getting counselling and God knows what, but just so awful. Awful. Oof. Body-worn video footage shows chaotic scenes as officers decide what to do. I mean, that's it. There might be the police, and I know they've had training, but they're still human beings walking into that scene. Can you imagine it? The carnage, the chaos. Just imagining. Police do need more credit, I think, for the things they have to go through. So body-worn video footage. Blood can be seen on the stairwell as well as a child lying on the landing. And in the footage, the officers confront Rudakubana, who is standing over BB King. Oh, the thought of him standing over that little one, that little girl. How awful that her final sight in this world was that twat, that monstrous, because he looked so terrifying, that devil standing over you, enjoying killing you. What a hateful man. Honestly, at this moment in time, I could cheerfully, give him the death penalty myself, because I'm so angry. God knows how their family feels, because, that man is a devil. Anyway, then the court was shown a video of police rescuing 2 people from the dance studio. The court was shown a video of Heidi Liddell, an adult who was at the dance class, and the girl who was with her in a bathroom inside the dance studio as police rescue them. Officers shout police. One officer says Jesus as he enters the room where the stabbings took place. Loud crying can be heard on the video. Joe, they must have felt like it wasn't real. They're probably like, oh my God, I'm going to wake up in a minute and this will all be a bad dream. Overall, 13 people were stabbed and 3 killed by Axel Rudakubana. And we are now being given details of the severe injuries people suffered. Several people have run out of the public gallery. The families of the children have asked us not to report the graphic nature of their injuries. The court is told Axel Rudakuna used his knife with a severe degree of force and children were stabbed multiple times. Elsie Stankham, that's the little red-haired girl on the left-hand side of your picture. Because I've got a photo. See, these are the girls up at the top here. This is Elsie in the red. This is BB in the middle, and this is Alice on the right-hand side. So her injuries were so severe she could not have been saved, no matter how quickly paramedics arrived. BB King was found on the landing outside the studio door, and Deanna here, prosecuting, said BB also had some defensive injuries. In the opinion of the pathologist, BB's injuries were untreatable, however quickly emergency help arrived. Twat. Alice de Silva Aguiar, yes, I remember this now. She actually died the following day, didn't she? And she's 9. She died from her injuries the morning after the attack. She managed to get out of the building alive. She was assessed by a paramedic outside the scene and she was taken to hospital. Despite emergency surgery, her injuries were too serious to survive, and she was pronounced dead at 1:20 the following morning. The prosecution then recalled injuries sustained by children who survived and can't be named. Thank God a lot of the children did survive, but, survived at least physically, but they've got mental scars, haven't they, that they'll have all their life. The court is now hearing about injuries to the children who survived the attack. These children cannot be identified due to a court order. They are all girls, some as young as 7, some who were in life-threatening conditions after the attack but survived. So this horrible man, he definitely chose vulnerable victims, didn't he? Little girls. I mean, what a man, eh? What a man. Choosing to attack a Taylor Swift dance thing with lots of little girls in there. Well, he'll get a shot when he gets in while he's in prison, won't he? Because now he'll be facing a whole different ball game, won't he? So the court heard how dance instructor Leanne Lucas was stabbed 5 times and she was taken to hospital in a life-threatening condition but survived. So the court has broke for lunch. They'll be coming back at 3 o'clock in 20 minutes. And, this is a roundup Well, we've just read through all that. We've read through all that. So I'm going to stay online while we wait for the. Is there a video here? Let's have a look.
That they want him to be offered.
Yeah. Let's watch this video.
That is a thought that keeps popping into all of our minds. But then I think certainly for me, I think that, and then I think, well, no, you know, life, we're here, we're together as a community, and you know, you have to find the good things every day. But I think, yeah, you do wonder who's living next door to you, for sure.
Tom, Father Tom Carpenter, let me bring you in. How has it been in Southport since?
Well, it was 6 months ago, and we've all had lives to try and lead in the interim. I think that from my perspective, the most notable thing that happened was how quickly blame was transferred from the man who did it to the authorities who are thought to have allowed it to happen. And so, although the sentencing today will mark an end of a particular phase, I think that because the anger is directed largely at the state, it won't be the sort of watershed that perhaps it would have been in other circumstances.
And in terms of how it's been in the 6 months, you know, it will have been very, very raw straight away afterwards. I'm sure it still is. But what would you say about the community coming together or repairing or perhaps supporting each other?
Well, you ask how the community is, and there certainly is one, which I don't think that we might have said immediately before it happened. Really? There are relationships that have been formed, you know, at the roadside where people were laying flowers, or at the vigil in the town centre. And the people of Southport do have something in common. Wicked and evil though the act was that caused it, and so there is a community in what had previously been anatomized and a fragmented area.
Yes.
And so there has to that extent been a sort of resurrection out of the evil, which as a Christian is a good thing.
Sarah, to come back to you, your daughter, did she know the girls who were in that class?
Yes.
And
yes.
How have children been supported? How have you been speaking to your daughter since?
So children are remarkably resilient, aren't they? They don't have the baggage that we have as adults, and the understanding of the world, and that kind of sense of overthinking that we have as adults. So they have been brilliantly resilient and wonderful at looking after each other. But they do talk about it. It comes out at times that you would least expect it. So I think we're always prepared for that. When it first happened, you know, there was a lot of worry amongst parents, you know, how do I have these conversations? Is it okay to show them that we're fearful? And I think that over time, what we've realized is that we can only be open and honest. We have to answer their questions. We have to answer their questions in an appropriate way, and be prepared for those at the times that we least expect it. You know, the schools have been amazing. There is support out there, and I think it will always happen. You know, as those children grow older as well, I think it will dawn on them, you know, what happened here and the parts that they might have played in that. And I think for us, that's almost what you worry about. You know, how will it impact our young people as they grow into adults? How will it impact the town as time moves on? There are so many thoughts, and to a certain extent, I think we have to remind ourselves to be in the moment. And today, it's supporting the families through the sentencing.
Now, it's interesting, something that came up there. Oh, let's just listen to what Charlie's saying.
Attack, which was described as a meticulously planned rampage. 6-year-old Bibi King, 7-year-old Elsie Stankham, and 9-year-old Alice Aguiar were all killed, with 8 other children and 2 adults also seriously injured. Tributes flooded in from the community, with hundreds of flowers, balloons and cuddly toys left by well-wishers trying to come to terms with what happened. Earlier this week, 18-year-old Axel Rudakubana unexpectedly pleaded guilty to all charges, including murder, attempted murder and terror-related offences. He will be sentenced later today and will likely receive a life sentence. The government has announced there will be a public inquiry into what happened. Our reporter Jay McCubbin has been to Southport to meet those whose lives have been changed by the attack.
3 young victims will never be forgotten here in Southport. Life is returning to normal for many in this small town, but for some it is changed forever.
People stopped doing things. I think that was what it was. You know how it's stuff when you start to laugh, when you start to smile, when you know what these families are and will always, you know, stuff be experiencing. And I think that's it. It's a little bit of respect.
This atrocity has hit us so hard. But it has brought out the best of us.
Beyond today's sentencing, people know there will be a reckoning about where else the blame should lie.
Yeah, I just feel that we can't keep up with the internet.
I mean, I think it's desperately difficult for people in social services because they get the blame for it, but you can't be everywhere.
The owner of Southport's Pleasureland is desperate for normality.
The impact on the town has been devastating. From within 1 hour of it happening, a lady came to the gate, her husband was a policeman saying, close the gate, close the gate. Within 1 other hour, we had people cancelling. And that's the same for everything in the town, okay?
While Norman Wallace has huge sympathy for the victims, his business needs visitors to return. It's been called Southport Pleasureland since the 1920s, but today he is rebranding.
From this day is Adventure Coast.
And the impetus for this has been these awful events.
That's drawn a line in the sand. We've got to draw another line in the sand now and move forward. The media keeps saying the bad word that I won't say.
What
Southport's
word?
a great place.
What word?
Stabbing. Southport's a great place. We do need to let them, we need to let them grieve, and we need to move on as a town.
Many businesses, like Graham's barbershop, were already struggling before the atrocity.
You're just banging your head against the wall.
And many like him have struggled more since.
We had a meeting, like how to get Southport back on track after this incident and all this, but we never had any solutions whatsoever. We've got no money, you're not getting no help, and get on with it yourself.
There's very real anger here towards the killer, but also authorities.
I had a policeman come in and telling me that they'd been to see this lad before, so it should have been dealt with. But because we've got the nonsense woke stuff, what we've got now, they won't go near them.
You sympathised with some of the rioters?
Not damaging stuff, but in principle, you say anything, you're a far right or something, they probably have me carted off. I'm a far right. I'm not. We're normal people. Like, I work 6 days a week, but I don't earn a 6 day a week income. So what's that about?
This is a small town badly shaken. Divisions do exist.
Whenever I think of Southport, apart from when I was a kid, we used to go to Southport quite often because it's not that far from Manchester. But I always think of Mitchell Quay, you know, who murdered his wife, Lindsay, and, you know, cut her up and hid her all around that Southport Pleasure Beach because he used to work on the fairground. That's, you know, I haven't got good associations with Southport except from when, it's funny, isn't it? You go to these places, I mean, you can't think, oh, Southport forever is going to be, you know, because this one thing happened in Southport. You can't think, oh, Southport's a dangerous place because of it, can you? Because this is like hopefully a real sort of, it's like the Dunblane, isn't it? The Dunblane murders, shootings, etc. They're one thing that happens in a place. It shouldn't sort of, identify that place for what it is. Southport is a nice place, and it's got the pleasure beach there, and there's beaches, and it's a place where people go on holiday. It's quite a quiet place normally, but of course this has put it on the map for the wrong reasons, hasn't it? Everyone now across the world probably, people, Americans, etc., probably never even wouldn't have known what Southport was. Well, now they go, oh yeah, that's where there was those stabbings. That'll be all. It unfortunately will be sort of always linked, won't it? But what they're going to do? They've changed the name of the pleasure beach. They can't change the name of Southport, can they?
But the desire for everyone here to heal is real.
I see a lot of growth, personal and community growth. The only place I would want to move to is Southport.
You'll be in walking distance, won't you?
Yeah, and I met such lovely people.
Caroline, the choir leader, has taken the decision to leave her home of 25 years and move to Southport, a town which she believes has shown real heart in terrible times.
They're wonderful people.
You can't wait to move.
I can't wait to move. I can't.
Jamie Cubbin, BBC News.
Good morning. It's Thursday, the 23rd of January. Our main story, the 18-year-old who pleaded guilty to murdering 3 young girls in Southport last summer will be sentenced later today.
Axel Rudakubana also pleaded guilty to attempting to kill 8 other children and 2 adults when he appeared in court earlier this week. Some of the families of the victims are expected to be at today's hearing.
Right, I noticed a couple of people are talking about the Plymouth murder. So let's have a look at that while we're waiting while we're waiting for that case, for the judge to give his verdict or his sentence. Let's have a look at what's going on or what happened in Plymouth. So Plymouth, another nice town, or I always feel about it, that it's a nice town. Something happened there last night, didn't it? Police have launched a murder investigation after the death of a woman in Plymouth. Devon and Cornwall police say they're searching for a man whose identity is known. Well, and maybe I shouldn't prejudge, but is it likely to be her partner? Is it likely to be her partner or her ex-partner? So officers were called to the West Hoe area of the city at 8:55 p.m. on Wednesday after the woman in her 40s was found seriously injured in West Hoe Road. She was treated at the scene by paramedics and taken to hospital, but unfortunately was pronounced dead in the early hours of the morning. She's not been identified, but her next of kin have been informed. So there's a manhunt going on, and a lot of roads have been closed off because they still haven't caught this suspect. And detectives say the 2 people were believed to be known to each other. And Detective Chief Inspector David Pebworth said there was no suggestion of a wider risk to members of the public. Well, they always say that, but someone who's murdered someone, they maybe it was a personal attack, but that doesn't mean to say that they're not a danger to the rest of the public, because they'll be desperate. They may find that quite often this kind of thing. If it is a partner or ex-partner, they could well find that person. They may have done something to themselves. That quite often happens, isn't it? So, yeah. So they've not identified the woman, still haven't apprehended the killer. Yeah, that's what's going on there. Let's go back to this.
But because he was 17, he can't be given a whole life order, we will expect that the judge, Mr. Justice Goose, will pass a life sentence with a minimum term. The hearing will begin today at 11 o'clock. And even though he has pleaded guilty, we will still hear the opening case from the prosecution here today. Some mitigating circumstances may be presented by the defence. We're expecting to hear victim impact statements as well from those people who lost loved ones and those who were injured in the attack. And as we know, Axel Rudakuna faces 16 charges, including the 3 murders, 8 attempted murder, possession of a knife, possession of a document likely to be of use for terrorism, and production of that chemical weapon ricin. So 16 charges will be put to him today by the judge, Mr. Justice Goose.
My colleague Sarah Campbell is in Liverpool for us now. Sarah, take us through what we can expect to happen today.
Yeah, morning to you, Sam. So I'm here on the steps, as you say, outside Liverpool Crown Court, and it is a really important day, a very difficult day, no doubt, for the families of the 3 girls who were killed and all those others who were injured. This is the first time that they will be able to sit in a room, in the same room as the person that carried out those terrible attacks last year, Axel Rudakubana, because of course, as we know, he pleaded guilty. It was a surprise that he pleaded guilty on Monday, and the families weren't in court to hear that. And as we know, the judge, Mr. Justice Goose, actually apologised afterwards for the fact that they weren't there to hear that, but they will be here today to hear what are likely to be some very difficult details about what happened on that July day last year. Let's bring in our correspondent, Mairead Smith, just to take us through exactly what's going to happen today. This is a sentencing, so this is working out how long Axel Rudakubana, who's 18 now, how long he should serve for all those killings.
That's right, Sarah. Axel Rudakubana was 17 when he carried out those attacks in Southport last summer, and because of that, he won't be subject to a whole life order. But it is expected that the judge today, Mr. Justice Goose, will pass a life sentence with a minimum term. Now, he's pleaded guilty to 16 charges, those 3 murders, 8 attempted murders of children who were there that day, and 2 others of Leanne Lucas, who was the teacher holding that Taylor Swift dance class, and John Hayes, a local businessman who came to help. So 16 charges in total, not only the murders and attempted murders, but also he's charged with producing that biological toxin ricin. He had a knife, also possession of a manual that was likely to be of use to terrorism. So there are 16 charges to be considered today. So it will be a long procedure today that will begin here at 11.
Thank you for a moment, Mairead. Yes, as Mairead there saying, it starts at 11.
So yeah, it is a long procedure. We're sort of hopefully coming towards the end of it. They'll be resuming shortly. Gosh, what was I going to say there? Oh, so apparently Axel as well, he had a kill list. He had a list of children at his school, that he wanted to kill. Just unbelievable, isn't it? He had a list of children that he wanted to kill. I mean, God, what was going on in that boy's head? I don't know. And where did it start? It's all right them saying he hasn't got any mental health issues, but he's not, he's not 100%, is he? To have, who writes a kill list of people they'd like to kill? We've all got people that get on our nerves, but that's different from actually sitting and write a list of people that you're going to kill. That's total extreme. Let's have a look at Sky News now.
Sentencing hearing for the man who killed 3 young girls at a dance class in Southport last year is about to resume after an hour's break. This morning, Axel Rudakubana was ordered to leave the courtroom by the judge after he began shouting over court proceedings, claiming he was feeling unwell. a family member of one of the victims yelled "coward" at him as he was taken from the room under judge's orders. With order restored in court, the prosecution resumed laying out the details of this case, including Rudakubana's background and other information about the attack that hasn't been heard before. Earlier today, Rudakubana had arrived here at court in a prison van. When he walked into the courtroom, he was wearing a grey tracksuit and a face mask, and he then sat in the dock with his head in his lap. Earlier this week, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder, 10 counts of attempted murder, 2 terrorism charges, and possession of a knife. Well, this afternoon, the families of 7-year-old Elsie Stankham, 9-year-old Alice De Silva Aguiar, and 6-year-old BB King, who lost their lives last summer, are waiting to hear the punishment for their children's killer, sentencing due to get underway a little later this afternoon. Well, our crime correspondent Martin Brunt joins me now, and the proceedings in court due to get underway very shortly. It's worth reminding people what we've heard so far today.
Yes, well, it's inevitably been pretty harrowing stuff, and you can only imagine what it must be like for the families of the victims, some of whom are sitting in court. And we know that Alice's parents particularly were some among the early arrivals at court, and along with others were given the opportunity by the judge to leave court at particularly grim moments. And I'm thinking more than anything of the moments when the CCTV footage was played that show, I mean, there were 2 excerpts particularly, I think, that would have been very difficult to watch. Some of it showed Rudakubana arriving in a taxi and entering the premises. And there was other footage, we think police body cam footage that showed the arrivals of the police. And in amongst all that footage were some very harrowing images of children fleeing, trying to flee. And one particular moment, I think, where the prosecutor described Rudakubana grabbing one of the children who had tried to flee from the dance school and being dragged back in. And of course, there were some very harrowing details of the wounds that were inflicted. There was another vivid and harrowing description of what Rudakubana said after his arrest when he was taken to the police station, about how he was glad about what he'd done. You know, difficult for anybody in court to listen to it, difficult for us to talk about it as relayed from inside court outside here. But for the families that have chosen to be in court, and of course many of them haven't chosen to be here, they've decided to stay away. But for those who have decided to come and sit through it, you know, perhaps even worse than they imagined it would be.
Rudakubana not in court. We were just explaining there that he was removed under the judge's orders because he was disrupting proceedings. He was saying that he needed a paramedic. He was shouting, "Do not continue, do not continue," and the judge ordered him out. He was assessed by medical professionals who deemed he was fit enough to go back inside that courtroom, and they asked for a second opinion, and the judge has said that he will be brought back into court for sentencing. However, Martin, if Axel Rudakuna is still disruptive and refuses to enter that courtroom for sentencing, what happens then? Because we have been here before and not too long ago with this kind of incident.
A number of defendants or convicted people in some very high-profile cases have refused to go back into court, either to leave their prison cells or, having been brought to court, to refuse to leave the cell at court to come up and hear their sentence. And it's difficult for a judge to know what to do. You know, there is this convention of reasonable force being used to bring somebody into the dock. But, you know, what's reasonable force? Now, there was a infamous case. Thomas Cashman was a Liverpool gangster who was convicted of shooting dead Olivia Pratt-Corbell, the 9-year-old girl, and he refused to come in and listen to his sentence. And it prompted a political initiative by the Tory government, who wanted to introduce new rules that would give judges the power to instruct custody officers to use reasonable force to bring somebody into the dock. But again, you know, what constitutes reasonable force? Olivia Pratt-Corbell's mother, Cheryl, was due to meet Keir Starmer this week to discuss the introduction of a law that would give judges the power to add 2 years to a sentence for somebody who refuses to come and listen to the sentence being handed down. And it's really all about the killer, and we're talking about very serious murder cases, the killer having to confront his victims in court. I mean, that's really the overarching issue that lies behind this initiative. Now, it might become law, it might not. Too late for today. So we'll see whether Rudakubana does have, you know, the wherewithal to come and listen to the sentence. We'll know in the next hour and a half or so.
Okay, Martin, thank you. Proceedings in court due to get underway after that break for lunch, a chance for everybody to take a breath, because it has been a very difficult and harrowing morning for those inside that courtroom here at Liverpool Crown Court. With the town of Southport torn apart by those tragic events of last summer, I've been speaking to Mark Foreman, who has been instrumental in bringing the community together and raising vital funds for the families of the victims. I started by asking him, when we spoke yesterday, if people there can ever truly recover.
Right, we've seen this a couple of times, so I'm going to come off this a minute. Let's go back to BBC. Watch that, because we haven't seen this before.
We have seen some of the legal teams arriving already. Families will start arriving over the next hour or so. And as we hear their sentencing due to take place, there are estimates as to the times that it might take, probably around about a couple of hours. And as I say, likely to be some distressing details which would have emerged during the trial. But of course, that didn't happen, which is why we are where we are today.
The teenage Southport killer will be sentenced this morning after pleading guilty to the murder of 3 little girls and the attempted.
Let's see. Oh gosh, well, just a bit of a warning, because I'm looking at the Telegraph here. You can see it on there. They're saying that he stabbed one of those little girls 122 times. How the hell? 122 times? How is that even possible? Southport killer stabbed a 6-year-old girl 122 times. That's BB. Oh, bless. A post-mortem found she had suffered at least 122 sharp force injuries. And Elsie had at least 85 sharp force injuries. Oh my God. Crikey. Okay, so apparently there's protesters outside the court. We can see the photos. Dear me, dear me, dear me, dear me. 122 times. And there he is in court asking for help, like saying he can't continue because he's got pain in his chest. He hasn't eaten, blah, 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 no, no, no. As if anybody cares. God, about his welfare. How is it? It's impossible. You know, for God's sake. 122 times and 85 times to the other one. How is that even possible? These little girls, you know, it's like, how would you even fit 122 stab wounds into a little body like that? It's beyond awful, isn't it? It really is. I don't think I've ever heard, you know, and I've been following true crime a long time, but I don't ever remember, you know, feeling so. This is just so indiscriminate and so unnecessary, and not even a reason for it. You know, there is no reason, of course. You know, there's no justification for doing what he's done, but he's not even done it for anything, just for the pure pleasure of hurting these children. That's why he's done it. He hasn't got an ideology. He hasn't got he just wanted. Something's gone so wrong with this boy that all he wanted to do was, you know, murder these little children and really brutally, like for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And that's why, you remember, you know, at the end of the year, I do this twonk of the year. And of course, he was given, I mean, that's too good a name for him, isn't it? But, you know, he was we've seen some atrocities last year. Like every year you see atrocities, don't you? But his was the worst because he didn't even know these children. They had done nothing to him. You know, it's just like ridiculous. I'm barring you. Bye. Adios, amigo. You know, yeah, hope he doesn't. Well, this part of me hopes he doesn't last in prison, but there's another part of me, I do think he should last in prison. I want him to suffer. I want him to suffer. I don't want him not to suffer. I want him to suffer. It's hard not to want him to suffer, isn't it? And the more details you hear, and I didn't, you know, it's not I didn't know these children personally. I just don't know how their parents are even getting up in the morning and putting one foot in front of the other. And, you know, some of them, they've got other children, you know, having to carry on for their other children. It must be so difficult, you know. And now today, hearing and seeing on the CCTV what happened to their little children, just can't. You can't get your head around it, can you? Anyway, let's watch this again.
Back into court for the second part of this hearing. He has said that he is fit, or he has been deemed fit and well to continue, and he is willing to come back into that courtroom. Because, Martin, that's been the big question. He started shouting that he needed a paramedic and upsetting proceedings about 15 minutes in to the start of this, and it was already delayed by nearly an hour. So the judge took him out so that things could progress in the hope that he might come back in, but we were just questioning whether he would or not. And now it appears that he is willing to come back into that room.
Yeah, I think the judge will allow him back in because, you know, there's this issue about the victims' families who are there, who want him to be there, particularly to hear those victim impact statements, which we're going to get to quite soon. And I've covered other cases where it's been said that it's very important for some victims when they're reading their statements, or their lawyers are reading their statements, for the killer to be there to take it all in and really understand, if he doesn't already, the impact that his actions have had. But of course, if he comes back in and he starts creating and causing a fuss, the judge will throw him straight out again. And will perhaps try and get him back in to hear his sentence.
Okay, Martin, for the moment, thank you. Just to reiterate the news that's come from inside court within the last few minutes. The court is back and starting again after that lunch break. We're expecting to hear, as Martin said, more from the prosecution before listening to the defence and hearing from the families of the victims. The judge, Mr. Justice Goose, says Axel Rudakuna has been seen by medical professionals this afternoon and is fit to return to court. Rudakubana, as I said, ordered to leave before the break after shouting and interrupting proceedings several times. earlier on here outside Liverpool Crown Court, I had a conversation with Tawhid Islam, who's chief executive of the Liverpool Muslim Council, about the effect that these tragic events have had on the wider community.
It's extremely difficult. I guess there is some comfort in the fact that there was a guilty plea, and that shared an ordeal of a 4-week trial, and horrific circumstances being lived again and again for the families who have been affected, who have been so strong and so brave in how they've responded since the atrocities took place. Communities are still very much sad. They're still very much trying to reflect on everything that's happened and trying to heal, which will take some time. I guess a lot of detail has come out, which hasn't helped. And there's a lot of confusion and fear as to why Axel Rudakubana had been referred to Prevent 3 times. He'd been referred to other agencies as well. And unfortunately, those institutions didn't act accordingly. So whilst there shouldn't be any one individual held to account, there has to be some level of accountability in respects to what happened. Are these institutions fit for purpose? Are these referrals being resourced properly? In a lot of ways, they're not. And communities need answers, and we need the truth to come out. And so we can begin the process of trying to move on, and most importantly, the families can have that process of trying to move on and trying to understand what happened. Ultimately, 3 beautiful lives have been lost, and we need time to reflect on that and ensure, and communities need to be certain that these type of atrocities and tragedies can't be allowed to happen again.
Tara, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you mentioned Prevent there. It's now well known that Rudakubana was referred to them 3 times. Yeah. 3 times he was seen not to be a risk because he didn't fit the parameter with what Prevent deal with, which is terrorism and extremism. He didn't subscribe to an ideology. He was a young man obsessed with violence. And there are many young men like that in the UK. And he got passed to various different agencies, but none of those agencies seem to have had the remit to deal with that obsession of violence. And it's been pointed out to me, and you raised it before we began speaking here live on air, that this was an act of violence against girls and young women. And that needs to be talked about more, because we talk about, was this terrorism, was this not terrorism? This was violence against women and girls, which in the main, and we talk about it so much here on Sky News, needs to be taken more seriously.
It does, and I feel that it's not being talked about enough. He did target a girls' dance class, and we hear more and more in the media about violence against women and this perpetuation of violence against women. And why aren't we having serious discussions about that? Like saying, we're talking about
to be classed as terrorism
exactly
for it to be dealt with appropriately.
Exactly. Why are we talking about terrorism and extremism all the time? Why aren't we talking about why was a girls' dance class targeted? Why are women being targeted? And why are some of the most violent acts being committed against women in across all communities? And that discussion doesn't seem to be being had at the moment, and it's worrying that that this is being allowed to just play out in a way that isn't getting to the fundamentals of what happened. That's who he targeted, and it needs to be talked about openly, and hard questions need to be asked.
Well, I'm joined again by our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt. There's a lot of information coming out very quickly now. Proceedings have started in court. SkyNews.com, on our website, we've got a live blog up and running with all of this detail. Our correspondents in court relaying it to us. Axel Rudakuna, as we said a few moments ago, was deemed fit and well enough to go back into the courtroom after being removed earlier on today. He agreed to go in. He went in. But he's just started shouting again in court, shouting, "Judge, judge, I need to be seen by the paramedic. I feel ill." Rudakubana has once again been removed from that courtroom. More disruption to what is already a difficult and upsetting day for everyone inside that courtroom. But Rudakubana out of the courtroom. In the meantime, proceedings are trying to continue as best they can with all this upset and disruption. And we've been hearing about some of the comments Rudakubana made unsolicited while in police custody after he was arrested for that attack.
Yes, the prosecutor referred to this at the start of her outline of the prosecution case this morning. I thought she'd probably come back to it, and she just has in the last few minutes. So these are what she describes as unsolicited comments that he made after his arrest.
What does that mean? That wasn't being interviewed under caution?
Absolutely,
yeah.
yeah. So these were recorded on CCTV footage or noted down at the time. And this is what he said, according to the prosecutor. "I'm glad those kids are dead. It makes me happy. I don't care. I'm feeling neutral. It's a good thing those children are dead. Literally such a good thing those kids are dead. 6 years old." And again, according to the prosecutor, Rudakubana said, "I'm so glad the children are dead. So glad. So happy. 6 years old. It's a good thing they are dead. Yeah." I mean, that's pretty horrific stuff.
If you are just joining us, this kind of distressing detail is coming out from that courtroom as we find out more detail about what happened that day and in the aftermath after Rudakubana's arrest. So just to keep that on your radar, that the details that are coming out are really upsetting. We've also been finding out more from the prosecution about the search of the defendant's home after his arrest, and in particular his room.
Yes, I mean, again, since those guilty pleas on Monday, some of this has emerged, and we certainly know that the offences, other than the murders and the attempted murders for which he pleaded guilty, so possession of, well, ricin is what the prosecutor has been talking about in the last few minutes. So this comes as a search of his home at Old School Close in the village of Banks. The police started searching, but it suddenly came to a halt, said the prosecutor, because in his bedroom, under the bed, they discovered a Tupperware container, which contained what she described as a pulp-like material, which they suspected could be the toxin ricin. So due to the risk to public health, the search was halted until protective gear and equipment was made available and was brought in. The prosecutor said when the search resumed, a number of items were recovered from his bedroom. They were just examined by an expert in chemical and biological warfare agents. He concluded that the Tupperware container did indeed contain actively toxic ricin pulp, which had been produced from castor beans using equipment found in the defendant's bedroom. It was at this point that Rudakubana started shouting again, saying that he needed to see a paramedic. "I feel ill."
The prosecution then goes on to say there's no evidence that the ricin produced in this case was ever used either during the attack, at the heart space, or at any other time. And that comes back to a lot of the questions that were asked at the start of this week about terrorism charges. You know, he does face 2 charges of that, but why the attack at that heart space didn't fall within that remit. And it can be confusing for people to understand that he has 2 terrorism charges, but the attack itself wasn't. It's worth just reiterating that, isn't it?
Well, the charge of possessing ricin wasn't brought under the terror legislation, but ricin is, of course, something that people will, automatically associate with terror attacks. I mean, we had a famous case some years ago of the production of ricin thought to have been used at least in a potential terror attack. Yes, I mean, one of the overriding issues is this question of why wasn't it designated a terror attack at the time, and why the authorities are still adamant that this does not fit the definition of terrorism. And I think the prosecutor is probably going to go on now to talk about the other part of this, the discovery of a document, an Al-Qaeda training manual that did eventually turn into a terror charge, and again a charge that Rudakubana pleaded guilty to on Monday. And it is difficult, I think, for the public to understand that here is a man who's been charged with a terror offence, the possession of that document. He's admitted it. He is, to all intents and purposes, a convicted terrorist now, but it's still not a terror incident because of that definition that, and the authorities continue to say this, that his motivation, they can't decide what exactly his motivation was, and they can't find any evidence that he was fighting a cause, a political cause or an ideological cause. And that means, in the eyes of the law, the authorities insist, it wasn't a terrorist incident.
Martin, there has just been some more information from our colleagues about the manual that was found. I'll just let you read that, and I'll just bring those watching up to speed with what's happened on court since they came back from that lunch break. Rudakubana, you'll be aware, was removed from court this morning after calling for a paramedic and disrupting court proceedings. It was around 15 or 20 minutes or so into the hearing. The judge asked for him to be removed and assessed by a medical professional. He was deemed fit and well to go back into the courtroom after the lunch break. In fact, he was willing and said he wanted to go back into the courtroom. But shortly after proceedings got underway again, he once again interrupted proceedings and started shouting. This happening within the last 5 minutes. He began to shout for a second time. He started by sitting quietly for a short period after the lunch break with his head lowered. He then shouted, "Judge, I feel really ill. I need to be seen by a paramedic." When there was no response, Rudakubana shouted, "Judge, judge, judge, I need to be seen by a paramedic." This is from our colleagues who are inside the courtroom for the Press Association. Mr. Justice Goose asked dock officers to once again remove Rudakubana. He said he has been seen by 2 teams of paramedics, both of whom agreed he is fit. That was at around 20 past 2, so just a few minutes ago. Rudakubana being removed from court for a second time. The judge has already said he wants him back in the courtroom for sentencing. We will follow the course of that and where Rudakubana is throughout the rest of proceedings in due course here on Sky News. Martin, more lines dropping or coming in from our colleagues about this Al-Qaeda training manual, which we found out about on Monday, and we're getting more details now.
Yes, we knew that he was charged with possession of this document, and again, he pleaded guilty to it on Monday, but that's about as much as we knew. So more information in the last few minutes from the prosecutor. On one of Rudakubana's tablets was a document entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual. The prosecutor explains this is an academic paper containing the text of the Al-Qaeda training manual, which contains advice and instruction on committing acts of terror. Of particular relevance, said the prosecutor, are the following passages in this manual. The 10th lesson provides instruction on how to carry out special tactical operations and refers to assassination and mass murder. Another part of it, assassins using cold steel. Another part refers to assassinating with a knife. Advice on where the enemy should be struck in order to kill. Another part of it, known as the 16th lesson, provides advice on assassinations with poison, and in particular, it provides on the production of ricin from castor beans, which can be obtained from nurseries throughout the country, and explains, said the prosecutor, that it is considered one of the most deadly poisons. The symptoms of ricin poisoning are set out, and the prosecutor is telling the judge this manual had been downloaded on 3 occasions in 2021.
Prosecution going on to say that on Rudakubana's tablet, his device, there were numerous images relating to different wars and international conflicts, including in Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Korea, Iraq, and the Balkans, as well as violent images of those injured in war, victims of torture, cartoons depicting killing, violence, and rape, and images that insulted or mocked a number of different religions, including Islam, Judaism, and Christianity.
The prosecution going on to say that the material found on these devices provides a window into the defendant's mind at the time, a fascination with violence of an extreme nature, that he'd obtained information on killings and how to kill and obtained weapons capable of killing. The evidence, said the prosecutor, demonstrates that the stabbings on that day were premeditated and had been planned by the defendant for several weeks.
We are just now getting some information about Axel Rudakubana's background, a lot of which we haven't heard before. The defendant, born in Cardiff, moving to Southport with his family in 2013. In 2017, he became a pupil at the Range High School in Formby. On the 4th of October 2019, he contacted Childline and asked Childline, what should I do if I want to kill somebody?
Oh my God.
In the days that followed, he explained that he hated someone at school who bullied him. He felt angry and he wanted to kill them. He said he'd taken a knife to school, but would only use it if the person really annoyed him. Now, as a result of that phone call to Childline, a referral was made to the police, who visited the defendant, Axel Rudakubana. He confirmed that he had taken a knife to school and added that he thought he would use it if he became angry. The school also informed that by this time the defendant had been temporarily excluded when he admitted to taking a knife to school on about 10 previous occasions.
For fuck's sake.
His exclusion was made permanent. Just some detail coming in there as to Axel Rudakubana's background as the courtroom hears a wider picture about the defendant and the events that led up to the actions of last summer. Martin, I'll leave you to keep across the information coming from our colleagues inside court, skynews.com, our website on there, the live blog with all of this detail coming out, outlined for you to follow throughout the course of the day. Some of it, as I said, really distressing. Martin and I have found it hard to read it and relay it to you. So just take care with some of the information that's there. Let's bring in now former Chief Constable of Northumbria Police, Sue Sim. Sue, good of you to join us this afternoon. This is a 4 to 6 week trial condensed into a day. What have you made of what we've heard so far?
This is, Sarah Jane, good afternoon. This is an absolutely horrific series of offences. It is totally and utterly unforgivable, and my heart goes out to the family and the friends of those 3 beautiful girls, Bibi, Elsie and Alice, and the 10 other people who Rudakubana actually tried to murder. These are horrendous, horrendous offences, but I think the one thing that we do need to make very, very clear to the public is, horrendous though they are, these are very, very rare in this extremity.
Yeah, Sue, rare in this extremity, but throughout the course of the day and in the build-up to this trial, I've spoken to so many people who say we have a problem with knife crime in this country. We have a problem with violent material being readily available online for young people. And when we talk about Rudakubana, who was referred to Prevent, the government's organisation to sort of tackle extremism and terrorism and stop people being radicalised, he was deemed not a risk because he didn't fit within that framework. He didn't subscribe to an ideology. The only clear ideology he had is that he was addicted to violence. And, you know, that is a problem up and down the country. You can't tell who is going to tip over the edge and carry out one of these extremely rare events. And I think that is the real problem here, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, you know, to make it very clear, I heard yourself and Martin talking about the confusion that there is around the terrorism side. If I can try and explain that to you, what a terrorist incident is for terrorists themselves, they will have an ideology. They will want to make the state or a governmental department change their mind, change their tactics about something, or they will also want to put literally mass fear amongst the public. Now, Rudakubana has absolutely fulfilled that last criteria. He made the public very, very fearful, very, very angry, very, very upset. He did not do any of this, as far as we're aware, to change the view of the government in relation to anything or a government body. Likewise, the other element to a terrorist incident is that the individuals must, and that's the law as it stands under the 2000 Terrorism Act, must have an ideological, religious, racial view in relation to whatever they've carried out. Rudakubana has never, ever been found to have that particular element. So that's why it's not classified as a terrorist incident. Now, 3 times he was referred to the PREVENT programme. PREVENT was set up under the contest, which is the way that we address terrorism incidents across the United Kingdom. And PREVENT is a way to take predominantly young people away from being terrorists. The aim is to stop any element of extremism. But again, when he was put into it, PREVENT is there to deal with preventing people becoming terrorists. That's its main aim. So when he was put in to that programme, suggested to the programme, they will have said he doesn't fulfil the criteria. Now, my view is, notwithstanding all of that, and I hope that helped your viewers a little bit because I do know it's complicated, but notwithstanding all of that, my questions are to the people who must have had contact with Rudakubana. Now, that is the schools themselves. Not only was he at Range High, he was excluded from Range, and then he went to a number of pupil referral units to, at the end of his academic career, he was only attending school for 1% of the time. Who was keeping an eye on that? Who was actually seeing what this young man was doing? He also had contact with the mental health agencies. Again, who was addressing any of the concerns that they found? He actually did and was convicted of an offence of assault, and he was referred into the youth offending teams rather than the multi-agency public protection arrangements, which are there to specifically keep the public safe and monitor people in the public. Because he was a juvenile, they put him into the youth offending team. Now, all of these things have to be looked at. I do not want to say at all that had people picked up the way this young man was behaving and his fascination with extreme violence, I do not want to say that that would have prevented this young man from committing these atrocious offences. It may well not have done. But what we need to look at now in the future is how to prevent these things happening again. We need much more joined up working to address isolated young men in particular with a propensity and an interest in awful violence.
Susan, really good of you to take the time to speak to us and react to events unfolding behind us here at Liverpool Crown Court. Thank you for your time. I just want to bring your attention to something that Merseyside Police have put on social media this afternoon. They've released a statement saying, "We are aware of social media posts online detailing the injuries sustained by the girls who died and those who were injured in the attack in Southport in July. The families of the little girls specifically asked that those details not be reported." It's something we were reflecting on a little earlier here on Sky News. So much distressing, disturbing detail coming out this afternoon. It's really hard to listen to and read, but the families of those girls have asked for specific, intimate details not to be released. But it seems that some members of the public on social media are circulating that information. So the message from Merseyside Police is don't. Well, more news coming from inside the courtroom all the time, just while I was having that conversation with Sue Sim there about the wider context of all of this. But let's focus on what's going on inside the courtroom.
Yeah, a lot more from the prosecutor in the last 10 minutes. She started referring to the prevent referrals. Remember that we've known that
three
over
of
the
them.
past few years, 3 times Rudakubana was referred to the government's counter-terror program, which is designed to stop people becoming terrorists, or if they have been radicalized, to try and talk them out of and explore the reasons behind their radicalization. So during this period, there were 3 referrals. The first in November 2019, he was referred to prevent because he'd been researching school shootings during an information technology class. A little over a year later, another referral to prevent because he'd uploaded to Instagram 2 images of the Libyan leader, Colonel Gaddafi. And 2 months after that, a third referral because he'd been found researching the London Bridge terror attack. Now, on the 17th of March, 2022, he was reported missing. He was found by police in possession of a small kitchen knife. He said he wanted to stab somebody so that he would get into trouble, and his TikTok account, which contained embarrassing videos, said the prosecutor, that he was unable to delete, would be closed down by the police. He said he'd also thought about poisoning people or had tried to make poison for the same reason.
We've also been hearing about the incident the week before the attack. Now, this information came out on Monday, the suggestion being that he tried to mount an attack starting the same way, setting off in a taxi from his home the week before what happened in Southport. We've been looking at that in a bit more detail in the courtroom. This was Range High School, the defendant booking a taxi in the name of Simon to take him to that school. And there's details about that because all we know so far is that allegedly his father was successful in stopping him leaving the house in that taxi that day.
This is what the prosecutor has said. So Rudakubana had booked the cab, he got into the back seat, and it was at that point that his father came out just as he was about to set off. Father ran out, said the prosecutor, and had to plead with the taxi driver not to take his son wherever he was going, to his old school. There was an argument, but eventually Rudakubana got out of the car and went back into the house. The prosecutor said it's unlikely to be a coincidence that this was the last day of term, with students due to leave the school premises at around 12:30, going off for the summer. The court may infer, said the prosecutor, that this was an earlier attempt to commit offences similar to the offences he was to carry out at the Heart Space, the dance school event, a week later.
We've now moved on to the victim impact statements inside the courtroom. The first statement coming from Leanne Lucas, the dance teacher who was injured in that attack. We had part of her witness statement in court earlier on today, detailing how she was stabbed in the back, running away from Axel Rudakuna, and she managed to shout to the children who he chased to say, "Run." Just a warning that this will no doubt contain some upsetting detail. I'm reading it for the first time as well. This is coming from our colleagues in court. This is an extract from her victim statement. Leanne Lucas saying the trauma of being both a victim and a witness has been horrendous. There are times when I will spiral into trauma, and the effect this has had on those close to me is unforgivable. The impact this has had on me can be summed up by one word: trauma. He targeted us because we were women and girls, vulnerable and easy prey. To discover that he had always set out to hurt the vulnerable is beyond comprehensible. For the victims and the surviving girls, I am surviving for you. That is from Leanne Lucas, the dance teacher, her victim statement being heard in court. And we are to hear a number of those before sentencing. Martin.
Yes, we're not quite clear. It's not quite clear who we're going to hear from. But we do believe that some families will read out their statements. Some will want their statements to be read only by the judge, but others may have lawyers reading out their statements. But this really is the chance for the victims to make it absolutely clear, victims and the families of the victims, to make it absolutely clear the real impact of what Rudakubana's murders and attempted murders have had on them. And I think, as we've said in the past, some of those victims who are reading out these statements, making their feelings clear, will be perhaps disappointed, frustrated, angry even that Rudakubana has again been removed from the courtroom because of his interruptions and behaviour, that he won't be there to listen at least to what they're saying.
Okay, Martin, for the moment, thank you. I'm going to now go to Emily Sporrell, Merseyside Police and Crime Commissioner. Thank you so much for joining us as part of our coverage this afternoon here outside Liverpool Crown Court. Just first of all, perhaps you can sum up what you've made of what we've heard so far today.
Well, it's obviously been a hugely traumatic day or few days, really, and I can't even begin to imagine what the families are going through. And my heart is very much with them as they read out their victim personal statements today. You know, we've obviously heard some of the details of the attack and what happened, and it all is just incredibly distressing. You know, this was a deeply, deeply, evil individual who has committed just the most atrocious act. And, as I say, my heart is with the families of what they're hearing today.
We're in the middle of victim impact statements at the moment. We're just hearing from one of the dance teachers involved, and we've been seeing CCTV footage in court as well throughout the course of the afternoon, including body cam footage worn by officers who were first to arrive at that scene. Perhaps you could talk to us about those first responders, because it wasn't just police. It was paramedics arriving on that scene. And when we talk about, as Leanne, the dance teacher, said, trauma, the one word she is using to describe the attack, this whole aftermath, that will have applied to them as well. The ripple effect of this is huge.
Absolutely. And, I would like to pay tribute to those first-time responders, as you say, individuals from all the blue light services who were there on scene, who were greeted with just, shocking scenes and having to go in and do their job, which they did incredibly well. But also since then, the police investigation teams, the individuals in custody who have had to manage this individual, and we've heard already some of the things he said while he was in custody. The investigation teams have been, viewing deeply distressing materials. And as you say, this will absolutely have an impact on them, and something that they are going to have to deal with it and process for a long time. So I'm very grateful to them for the work they've done and their resilience and commitment in trying to get justice ultimately for the families.
So many organisations in the spotlight over the failings that have been outlined this week. Axel Rudakuna, known to local authorities, known to the police, mental health professionals, Prevent, known to so many different organisations. And the question people want answered, I mean, I heard this described earlier on by a former Merseyside police inspector as a watershed moment. What will be learnt from this in terms of the failings? Axel Rudakuna was in contact with police at least, it says in court today, at least 10 times over carrying a knife. And you put it into the bigger picture, the bigger report we're now learning about how he was known with other agencies. It is a huge failing. He was in the net, but nobody did anything about it.
Well, as you say, we know that he had contact with a number of different agencies, across the Northwest. And, I welcome the inquiry that has been announced, because people rightly have questions. People are angry. I am angry. I want to know how something like this could happen in our wonderful community. So I think it's right that the inquiry has been called, and I'm hopeful that will give us some of those answers to try and understand if anything could have been done differently, what are the lessons learned, and importantly, any recommendations or actions that come out of that they will be delivered on. And certainly within my role, if there's any actions that need to be taken on board, I will make sure that they are responded to. But as you say, it's an incredibly, difficult, complicated situation, lots of agencies involved, and I'm hopeful the inquiry will give us some clarity around some of that.
Yeah, you want clarity and you want action. What do you think would best come out of a public inquiry to allow you to effectively do your job better, to give you more power? Because as I said, the local police force coming into contact with the same young man 10 times about carrying a knife. What was it you couldn't do? And what was it you hope a public inquiry will enable you to do?
Well, as I say, it's hard for me to comment on any of that detail because we don't yet know the answers to that. And that's the role of the inquiry, is to ask those questions, find out, what contact they had with, different police forces, with different agencies, what happened at this contact, what decisions were being made, how are agencies, organisations talking to each other? Could any of that been done differently? I don't have the answers to that right now. That's why this inquiry is so important, so we get a real understanding of what happened, what went wrong, and how we can fix it, and so that's what I'm hoping will come out of that.
How do you make a community like Southport safe again, in terms of those affected by this will carry the weight of what happened for the rest of their lives, the community wanting to get back to normal? But it is one of the perhaps unanswerable questions in all of this, in terms of a random attack, somebody known to authorities, multiple agencies, multiple times. Still, he wasn't able to be stopped. And that is possibly the most difficult thing to take away from all of this.
Well, I've been up to Southport obviously numerous times, and I've spoken to a number of residents and the different groups. And I will say Southport is an incredible community. It's very resilient, very strong. It has done a brilliant job of wrapping its arms around the families and everybody who has been affected by this. And as I say, in terms of getting the answers to those questions, hopefully the inquiry will give them that reassurance around what, how things might be done differently. We have been working very hard to make sure that support is in place for the communities of Southport. We recognise that the trauma that lots of different people will be feeling. Our victim care Merseyside service has been proactively going out and making themselves available to the Southport community, and they continue to be available for anyone who might be affected by what's going on. I am really keen to make sure that we support Southport to move forward on that journey of recovery, and hopefully, as I say, take that step forward. So, this isn't the legacy of Southport, but they're able to get back to what they're doing and be a brilliant and vibrant community for all of their local residents.
Okay. I'm just going to pause that a minute. I'm going to go over to the BBC blog because they seem to have more information on there about what's actually going on. So, as we heard her saying earlier, there were let's go to where we are. Where we were. So he came back in after lunch. He was back in the dock as the court hearing resumed. Then they talked about how after his arrest, he said it's a good thing those children are dead, etc. Then it goes on to talk about the discovery of Rissin at his home under the bed, wasn't it? I think, and the knives, etc. Then it was at 3:25 that he started yelling again and was removed from court. And he kept saying, I need to be seen by a paramedic. I feel ill. I feel ill. So the judge had him removed again. And he says that the court is aware that he's been seen by 2 teams of paramedics and they deem that he is fit to attend. So he's just putting it on, isn't he? Anyway, there's no evidence then, it was saying, that of any toxic substance being used during the attack, even though he had some at home. And it says, although the evidence is clear Rissin was produced by Rudakubana in his bedroom, there's no evidence it was used either during that attack or any other time. She goes on to say a machete was there in a scabbard, a set of arrows and a black holdall were also found in his bedroom, and a kitchen knife identical to the one used in the stabbing was found in the living room where it appeared that he had been sleeping. That's strange, isn't it? Well, I wonder why he was sleeping in the living room. Now, I just want to say, I do think there is not enough help for, but as I say, from personal experience in my family, there is not enough help for parents that are dealing with teenagers that are unruly or displaying threatening or worrying behaviour. You know, because it's difficult you don't want to ring the police. You don't want to ring the police on your own child because, you know, you want some support, some help. And sometimes when you ring the police, then the police sort of jump in, and you don't want that. You want advice, you want help. Also, a lot of these young, I expect exactly what Axel was doing. He was probably threatening suicide himself as well. You know, threatening to take his own life. His parents will have been worried about him. You know, the trouble is when you're the actual parents, you've got an emotional or, you know, a family member, you've got an emotional involvement. You know, we can all look. I've done it myself with kids years ago before I had kids. Look and think, you know, what are they going on about? You just have to tell them. Just tell them they can't do that. You know, just tell them they can't go on the computer, or tell them this, that, or the other. Of course, when you have children yourself, it's completely different because you've got an emotional connection and they know how to play you. They know the things to say that will make you worry about them. Blah, de, blah, de, blah, de, blah. You know, it's an absolute nightmare. And what you need is someone to support you in decisions. And I tell you, I know for a fact, it doesn't matter if you're in a couple or if you're a single parent, makes no difference. Once you start having problems with teenagers, it doesn't matter how many parents. And in fact, psychologists once told me is sometimes it can be worse if you're in a couple, because then the parents start arguing about what's the right thing to do. You know, that maybe the father's saying, no, something should be done. But the mother's saying, oh, no, you know, you don't want to go to the police. You know, maybe the father's saying, oh, we've got to go to the police because I'm sick of this behaviour. You know, you get arguments between the couples, and often the couples split up over this behaviour of the children. You know, it's not as simple as, you know, it feels simple from the outside. It's just like, oh, you just have to tell them. You just have to, you know, report it to the police or find a psychologist, blah, 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 do this, do that. When you're in it, it's not the same as like if you're in a coercive control relationship. In fact, to me, it's exactly like a coercive control relationship, but it's worse because you can't leave your child. You know, you can leave an abusive partner or a coercive control partner. You can't leave an abusive child. They're your child forever. Whatever you had them, you're responsible for them forever, whatever especially when they're still young like that. You know, what are you going to do with a 13-year-old? Put them into care. I bet they felt like it a couple of times. So it's not easy. It's difficult. And I really feel for Axel's parents big time. I really do. Anyway, so why he was sleeping in the living room, God knows why. But anyway, he had this manual explaining how to carry out a lethal knife attack, military studies, where's that gone? Military studies in the jihad against the tyrants, etc. So, also, what was the next? Images of weapons were found on his devices. There were multiple images of knives, machetes, which he'd searched for on various online retailers. He had sent emails to various retailers making inquiries about buying knives. And some of the emails asked whether they could be made in plain packaging. Also, they saw that he'd searched images of wars and conflicts, numerous images on his devices relating to different wars and international conflicts, Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Korea, Iraq and the Balkans, violent images, dead bodies, victims of torture, beheadings, cartoons depicting killing, violence and RAPE, or others that insulted or mocked different religions, including Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. A broad spread of material that showed he was fascinated with violence of an extreme nature. he had obtained information on killings and how to kill, and obtained weapons capable of killing. And he'd asked Childline, what should I do if I want to kill someone? We listened to that, didn't we? You know, on the 4th of October 2019, he contacted Childline and said, what should I do if I want to kill somebody? Well, I'm sorry, if that's not a red flag, what is? And also, you know, I know they keep saying he's not got mental health. He obviously has got mental health issues, because it's not normal, that, is it? I mean, he's a bad person, but he's still, you know, he's not normal, is he? Anyway, in the days that followed, he explained he hated someone at school who bullied him. He felt angry, he wanted to kill them. And there's probably a lot of kids feel angry towards bullies, but they don't normally go ahead with it, do they? He said he'd taken a knife to school and he thought he would use it if he became angry. I mean, he couldn't really be any more open, could he? He's phoned up Childline and said, what do you do if you want to kill someone? He's told them that he's taken a knife to school. He said he'll use it if he became angry. He might as well have tattooed across his head, one day I'm going to murder a load of people. I mean, really, how many red flags do you want? So they made referrals to the multi-agency safeguard hub. They've always got these posh names, means fuck all, because they don't do anything. And the child and adolescent mental health service did fuck all, did they? What did they do? Nothing. Not, you should have done something when he was 13. Anyway, and then it goes saying about at school, you know, we know that he took a hockey stick into school and assaulted another student and broke their wrist. We know that he was referred 3 times to Prevent. So his first reference was for research in school shootings during an information technology class. So that must have been at school. The next 2 referrals in 2021, he uploaded to Instagram 2 images of Colonel Gaddafi and had been found researching the London Bridge terror attack. And then, following reports of incidents at home, he stopped attending school in May 2021. A place was found from another school in 2022, but he didn't attend, so he wasn't going to school, was he? So remember as well, we'd heard that he booked a taxi to his old school in days before the attack, but luckily his father managed to stop him from going. What would he have done there? So now we've got the victim's personal statements. First is a statement being read by the father of one of the surviving children. He said he asked his 9-year-old daughter to explain the impact the events had on her. And she said, it's been very hard to deal with what happened to me at Heartspace. I struggle with my emotions. I have scars I know that will be with me forever, but I want to look forward. So, and her father said, her words both horrify us and make us proud. Our daughter is strong, our daughter is positive, our daughter is brave. Our daughter is everything that Axel Rudakubana is not. She is our hero. And then the dance instructor, Leanne Lucas's statement. I won't read the whole thing out, but I'll read some bits. So she was stabbed 5 times during the attack. And she said, as a 36-year-old woman, I cannot stay in my own home alone. As a 36-year-old woman, I can't go to work. I can't walk down the street without holding my breath as I bypass a person and then glance back to see if they've attempted to stab me. I can't enter a public place without considering how I will get out in the event of an emergency. Right, sorry, I'll just keep checking back, make sure I'm not missing anything. There was a long period of time after the incident where I felt I had no trust in society. I'm trying to see the goodness in the world. However, the badness has been evidentially proven to me to exist in plain sight on our doorsteps in our community. You never think this is going to happen to you. I never thought it was going to happen to me. Hey, and now she's saying, I feel like I can no longer be trusted again. I know people will disagree and say it's not true, but his actions have proven I can never feel that level of responsibility again where there may be dangers to others. On that day, I received several injuries that have not only affected me physically but mentally. I, as the other girls, have scars we cannot unsee, scars we cannot move on from. Ooh. Then a teenage survivor said, this is a section of what they said, I watched you stab someone and then I saw you coming for me. It was like slow motion. You stabbed me in the arm and instinctively I turned, and that's when you continued to stab me in the back. Although I didn't feel it at the time. A lot of people say that, don't they, when they're stabbed, that they often don't feel it, actually feel it at the time. All I could hear was the screams. I was so scared of what you were doing and I was in blind panic. So that's how far we've got so far. Let's go back to Sky News again. Oh, there you go. Here's the
Elsie and BB and the surviving girls. I'm surviving for you. Well, Martin, we'll get more of those statements coming out of court in due course, and we'll continue to bring you some of them here on Sky News. Our live blog is up and running with a lot of the details that are happening in court. Skynews.com. Go to the Southport live blog. We will, of course, have cameras in court a little later when sentencing happens, Martin.
We will, under the new convention, relatively new convention. Certain sentences are shown live. This is going to be one of those occasions, such as the huge public interest. I guess it was inevitable that this would be one of those that viewers will be able to watch live. It's the only bit of the proceedings that are allowed, is allowed under the law. So we might get perhaps an hour of live TV from inside the court. The judge, and we think he'll probably start sometime in the next hour, might take a break to consider a bit more about what sentence he's going to introduce. And he has to follow quite a lot of guidelines in arriving at his sentence, and he has to explain how he's decided on the sentence. We know, of course, that it will be inevitably a mandatory life sentence, certainly 3 life sentences for the 3 murders. He may decide to give him life sentences for the 10 attempted murders as well. But of course, crucially for the judge, he has to decide the minimum number of years that Rudakubana must spend in jail before he's allowed an opportunity to ask for parole. But it's going to be a very, very big minimum number of years, what's known as the tariff. I imagine it's going to be in the 30s, 40s, something like that. At which point, once he's done that sentence, and of course he'll be a middle-aged man by then, he'll be able to ask for parole. Doesn't mean he'll get it. He will only be released if the parole board, who will consider it, deems him to be of no risk or a very minimum risk to the public. There's no guarantee that he will ever be released from prison.
We've just been hearing in court, I understand from our colleagues inside, that a statement from Elsie's mother has been read out in court. That's been read out by her lawyer. And they are now hearing a statement from a supervisor who was working with Leanne at that dance class. That statement also being read by her lawyer. Those victim impact statements being read out in court as we speak. After the sentencing, Martin, what happens to Rudakubana?
He'll be taken back. Well, we think he's been held this week at a local prison. I mean, for the last few months, he's been held at Belmarsh in southeast London, which is the country's most secure prison. He'd been brought up ahead of his trial and held at a local jail. I imagine that he will go back to that jail, local jail, immediately after sentence today, and then may go back to Belmarsh, or depending where there is a space for him. Just remember how overcrowded our jails are. I think it's most likely he'll go back to Belmarsh, but he will be moved into, well, I imagine he's been held in a pretty tough, restricted regime already, more than anything for his own protection, because this is clearly a young man who is going to be the target of other prisoners, just simply because of the horror of what he's done.
Martin, thank you for the moment. I know you're keeping across what's happening in court. I'm just going to bring people watching an interview that I did yesterday, Southport, of course, turned upside down, torn apart by this tragic event last summer. They're hoping for a bit of closure after today and the chance to rebuild. A man who's been instrumental in that rebuild and in raising funds for the families of the victims is Mark Foreman. I spoke to him yesterday, and I started by asking the really difficult question: if people in Southport can ever truly recover from what's happened to them.
I think it will recover, and unlike with the grieving process, that if a relative or somebody close to you dies, it does take time. And I guess the trauma thing of ups and downs, and things will, little traumas or little T's or big T's, to say what affects you more going forth. And people will get on, and people will start coming back to Southport. And I mean, if you walk down the high street and if you walk to our parks and the schools and everything, people are getting on, and people are getting on with their own lives. But it's been tainted. It's been tainted from the actions of one individual and obviously the rioters the next night. And we are getting on, and we are grieving.
This week, Southport was steeling itself for a trial, a long trial, having to relive the trauma of the events of the summer. That all changed on Monday when a guilty plea was entered. What was the reaction to that? Because you were getting ready for the long haul, steeling yourself mentally for that. And now it will all be finished by the end of this week. What was the reaction like to that? Was there a sense of relief?
There's a sense of relief, but there's also a sense of people want answers. People want to understand why it happened, especially why it happened in Southport, why it happened to our friends, our families, our kids, our community. Because it makes no sense in my world, in my life, because these sort of things don't happen around the corner from where we live. I've lived in London before, and even then you kind of expect, higher crime rates and stuff, but even nothing like this. So there's a general feeling of, I guess, frustration, and there will be anger, and depending on what the trial says tomorrow for the sentencing, I don't know what will happen, but I'm hoping that it's going to be closure. I'm hoping that it's going to be, people can start getting on with their lives, people can start healing more and grieving more, and just forget it happened. I know it's not going to be possible to forget.
Yes. More of that interview coming up on the UK Tonight at 8 o'clock. Well, as we've been learning this week, Axel Rudakuna had been reported to several authorities over his violent interests and actions. We can take a look at what...
Right, I'm just going to go now. So the latest thing that's come on the BBC is the victim impact statement from Alice's parents. So let's have a look at that. Let me just turn that down. So yeah, 8 minutes past 4, the parents of Alice De Silva Aguiar, who was 9 years old, read out their statement. It's like we're stuck in a horror movie. What do we do now? A statement is now being read by the parents of Alice De Silva Aguiar, 9, who was killed in the attack she died the following morning. Remember, we were just reading about that. She was managed, to be saved at the scene, but she died just after 1 o'clock the following morning in hospital. Here's some of what they wanted the court to hear. Alice was always very kind. A world of possibilities awaited her. She was a beautiful girl. She was a strong and confident pre-teen with a world of dreams. That summer's day, she was so excited to go to the dance workshop In a matter of minutes, our lives were shattered and turned upside down. We kept up hope every second of her 14-hour fight. But when she lost her fight, we lost our lives. It shattered our souls. It feels like we're stuck in a 5D horror movie with moving pictures and moments being relived. We can't get out. Some moments are easier than others, but every day is the same. Alice is not here when we wake up, and she never will be. There's a sense of loss of foundation too. Alice was our purpose for living. So what do we do now? Oh gosh, that's very powerful, isn't it? Okay, let's go back to this again.
In this extremity.
Yeah, so rare in this extremity, but throughout the course of the day and in the build-up to this trial, I've spoken to so many people who say we have a problem with knife crime in this country. We have a problem with violent material being readily available online for young people. And when we talk about Rudakubana, who was referred to Prevent, the government's organisation to sort of tackle extremism and terrorism and stop people being radicalised, he was deemed not a risk because he didn't fit within that framework. He didn't subscribe to an ideology. The only clear ideology he had is that he was addicted to violence. And, you know, that is a problem up and down the country. You can't tell who is going to tip over the edge and carry out one of these extremely rare events. And I think that is the real problem here, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, you know, to make it very clear, I heard yourself and Martin talking about the confusion that there is around the terrorism side. If I can try and explain that to you, what a terrorist incident is for terrorists themselves, they will have an ideology. They will want to make the state or a governmental department change their mind, change their tactics about something, or they will also want to put literally mass fear amongst the public. Now, Rudakubana has absolutely fulfilled that last criteria. He made the public very, very fearful, very, very angry, very, very upset. He did not do any of this, as far as we're aware, to change the view of the government in relation to anything or a government body. Likewise, the other element to a terrorist incident is that the individuals must, and that's the law as it stands under the 2000 Terrorism Act, must have an ideological, religious, racial view in relation to whatever they've carried out.
Let's try this.
And perhaps take in the true impact of their actions. Now, you know, it's very difficult to know what impact it's having on the perpetrators themselves. Sometimes they don't appear to be paying attention. Sometimes they're, you know, their eyes are wandering around the court. It's very seldom that the victims do manage to get the glance and the eye contact with that perpetrator. But nonetheless, I think if you are delivering that statement yourself and the perpetrator is sitting there just a few yards away from you, you must feel that she is at least listening to what you're saying. We've just had a bit more from the statement from Alice's parents being delivered in court by the prosecutor. Them saying, Alice's parents saying that their world was shattered in a matter of minutes. And they go on to say, we would do anything to hold Alice one more time. It feels, they say, like we're stuck in a 5-dimensional horror movie. They go on to say that Alice was their purpose of living. And sometimes they still call her name, only, they say, to be met by a shot in the heart.
Oh,
Martin, thank you. Those victim impact statements continue to be read out in the courtroom behind me here at Liverpool Crown Court. Well, this afternoon, the families of 7-year-old Elsie Stankham, 9-year-old Alice Da Silva Aguiar, and 6-year-old BB King, who were killed last summer, are waiting patiently to hear the punishment for their children's killer. Reading out her victim impact statement in court today, the girls' dance teacher, Leanne Lucas. She said the trauma of being both a victim and a witness has been horrendous. There are times when I will spiral into trauma, and the effect this has had on those close to me is unforgivable. The impact this has had on me can be summed up by one word: trauma. He targeted us because we were women and girls, vulnerable and easy prey. To discover that he had always set out to hurt the vulnerable is beyond comprehensible. For Alice, Elsie, and BB and the surviving girls, I'm surviving for you. Well, Martin, we'll get more of those statements coming out of court in due course, and we'll continue to bring you some of them here on Sky News. Our live blog is up and running with a lot of the details that are happening in court. skynews.com. Go to the Southport live blog. We will, of course, have cameras in court.
Right, I'm going to go to, there's been another statement, victim impact statement issued. I'm going to go to the BBC website. And let me just turn that down. So, this is the mother of Elsie Stankham. This is her statement, and she tells Rudakubana he is a coward. The court next hears a statement from Jenny Stankham, Elsie Stankham's mother, who directs some of her remarks at Axel Rudakubana, read out by prosecution lawyer Deanna Casey. Here's some of what she wanted to say. We are not going to stand here and list everything you've taken away from us, because we refuse to give you the satisfaction of hearing it. We will not let you know anything about Elsie, because you don't deserve to know the extraordinary person she was. You know what you have done, and we hope the weight of that knowledge haunts you every single day. What you did was not only cruel and pure evil, it was the act of a coward. Though you have stolen our daughter from us, you will not take away our determination to honour her memory. We will carry her love, positivity, and her legacy forward, no matter how much pain you have caused. So that's the latest statement. Oh no, and then we've got now the statement from the other dance instructor, Heidi Liddell. I was in tears constantly, and I didn't feel safe in my own home. That's very similar to what the other woman said, isn't it? It got to the point that the front and back door had to remain locked at all times. However, all the doors inside of the house had to be left open, as I found it difficult to be in enclosed spaces, and I was petrified of what would be on the other side of the door. I replayed the incident over and over in my mind, changing the sequence of events. I struggled mentally with not being physically injured, and I felt guilty for this. She'll have survivor's guilt. That's common. People who survive things like that, they feel guilty that they've survived. They feel guilty that they've survived and those little girls have died. It's terrible, isn't it? Everyone feels guilty except that twonk.
Sentence today, and then may go back to Belmarsh, or depending where there is a space for him. Just remember how overcrowded our jails are. I think it's most likely he'll go back to Belmarsh, but he will be moved into, well, I imagine he's been held in a pretty tough, restricted regime already, more than anything for his own protection, because this is clearly a young man who is going to be the target of other prisoners, just simply because of the horror of what he's done.
Martin, thank you for the moment. I know you're keeping across what's happening in court. I'm just going to bring people watching an interview that I did yesterday, Southport, of course, turned upside down, torn apart by this tragic event last summer. They're hoping for a bit of closure after today and the chance to rebuild. A man who's been instrumental in that rebuild and in raising funds for the families of the victims is Mark Foreman. I spoke to him yesterday, and I started by asking the.
Right, well, we've watched that a couple of times, so I'm not going to put that on again. Let me find something else while we're... I think the judge is probably going to take another break shortly, and then so I may have to break off again, and because I've got to go and pick up number one son soon from work, and then probably the judge's actual sentencing is on overtime. That's what I was trying to say earlier on the chat. I was just trying to say, oh, the judge will be a bit peed off that he's got to work overtime today. And it wouldn't let me put it in the chat. It just kept rejecting the comment as spam. It's been rejecting a lot of my comments as spam. Drives me mad when it does that. I'll never understand YouTube, honestly. Got the bots sort of doing this, that, and the other, but I don't understand their criteria. Feels like there's loads of things you can say, and then things that you think, well, why can't you say? It wouldn't let me say. What was that other thing I was trying to say? Oh, that he should be sedated. I was trying to put in a comment, you know, when it was saying about him getting hysterical, that he should be sedated and made to stay in court. It wouldn't let me say that. YouTube just kept chucking that out. Wouldn't have it. Let's see. Let's see if I can find something else to show you. I'm looking for the video that somebody there was a video of one of the men that had tried to help. I was looking for that. Oh yeah. Let's watch this. Let's see. Get the sound on.
And then all of a sudden he slammed on the middle of the road and said, have you seen that? On the middle of the road and said, have you seen that? I said, no. He reverses the van back. And then all I see from my side was literally half a head from a girl hanging from the side of a car. So I jump out the car and I go up to her and I just ask her if she's all right. And she just looked in complete shock. She had blood all over her body. And she just screamed at me. She said, he's killing kids over there. He's killing kids over there. I just looked at Martin and we were just in complete shock. We just didn't know what to think, didn't know what to do. But looking at this woman, she looked in a really bad way, and I just knew it was a really bad situation. So me and Martin start walking towards the place where she's pointed at.
And how far is she from the place where she's pointing at?
She's at the top of the road, leaning against the car. There was more people down the road, but at this stage, at the time, we were so focused on this girl, we didn't see there was more people down there. We're just hearing this girl screaming to us that this guy's stabbing kids at this location. So we start walking down, we'll start running towards this place where she's pointed, and she gets up. It's like she used all of her energy to point to us where this was happening, and then she completely collapses onto the floor, in which case we go up to make sure she's all right. She was also on the phone to the police at the same time, which is when I've took the phone off her and I'm on the phone to the police. Martin's making sure she's all right. I start running towards this direction, which is obviously where this is happening, where these kids are. in the dance studio, and I'm running. I get to the car park, and as I'm running towards the door, there's a car which is a woman's in the car, and she's beeping her horn and she's screaming for me to come over. So I run straight over to the car, and it's just a middle-aged woman, and she's got, I presume, one of her child in the passenger seat, and then in the back there's like 4 or 5 more kids, all in the back, covered in blood. It was like a scene of what you'd see on like a disaster film, honestly. And she just looked at me, the woman, and she said, "Honestly, love, I just want to make sure these kids are safe. I'm just going to park on the road. Please, can you get this girl out?" So you got the driver's side. On the driver's side, behind the driver's seat, I open the door, and honestly, like, there's this girl, which will probably stay with me for the rest of my life, and she was completely out of it. I can't explain to you how horrific it is what I saw, but in the moment, I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know what to think. I just wanted to get her out of the car and try and get her to safety. So I've just got this girl out of the car, and I've ran towards the road, and I've just been, because we're there at the start, you see, so there's only a few members of the public, and the main thing in that specific moment was like, there's still more, like, this is actually happening, and there's people inside there, because that's where they've been, that's where they've come from. So I just initially wanted to get her out of the car and try and get her to safety, like, but I didn't know where was safe, if that makes sense. So I take her to the road, and I'm shouting and I'm screaming for help. Someone ring the ambulance. Everyone was trying to do the best. No one expected that would happen. But in the moment, all you want is just like a professional to be there to like kind of know what to do. So I go to the front, I take her out of the car park, I run to the front, I'm shouting all this, then we put her down, me and Martin put her down. Then Martin stays with this girl then. Okay, and there's more people which are coming at this stage. There's more people coming to help. Everyone's gathering around. Everyone's doing what they can do. And then I run back in. I run back into the car park, and I basically run towards the door which is the entrance and the exit out to the dance studio. And you get there, and it's like the building's like an L shape, and you've got the gym where I used to go to upstairs, and there was 2 men in this bit here, and I don't know who's who. I don't know what's going on. So I'm looking at these men, and they just look completely shook up and frightened, and they're pointing to this dance studio, saying, "He's in there, mate. He's in there." So I open the door downstairs, and as you go in, there's just a stairway which goes up. There's a landing at the top, and then which goes through to, I presume, the dance studio. So I just remember opening the door, and I was shouting hello, just see if anyone was there. And then I remember just taking a step on. I remember go onto the stairs, and took a few steps onto the stairs. I'm still at the bottom of the stairs though, and I look up, and then there's just this guy there at the top of the stairs, just in a full tracksuit with his hood up, with a knife, and it's like he maybe didn't realise that I was going to be in there, but we've looked at each other, then he's scurried off to the side.
And you locked eyes with this man. You looked at him.
I looked at this guy, yeah.
At that point, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking things which I'm not allowed to be saying on Sky News right now, but I'm just at the same time, I'm really scared as well. Do you know what I mean? Because all I saw was a knife. All I thought was there was more people in there which were hurting people. So I'm there by myself at the bottom of the stairs. I didn't know, honestly, I just wanted to hurt him so bad. But at the same time, I was scared for myself, and I was just wanted to be up there to help anyone who was up there. So I've come, he's scurried off. I've come outside, and then I've been screaming then, because I know where he is. I'm trying to get everyone to come to the door. We were there for a good 10 minutes before any police arrived, and just the moment we turned up to the point where I've smashed the door, was a good 8 to 10 minutes, which felt like a lifetime, if that makes sense. And then we've ran. I'm completely hectic now, because I've seen the guy. And I know he's up there, and I'm just screaming, where's the police, where's the police? One police car finally turns up, and I'm screaming, he's down there. He just gets out where I am, and then he runs with me to the door. We run straight to the door, and then we get to the doorway, and then he said, we've got to wait for backup, got to wait for someone else to come there, because he only had a baton on him. And then his colleague came with a taser, and then he comes in front. So these 2 police officers go up the stairs, then I'm right behind them. They tackle this guy down to the floor straight away. There was no kind of fight at all. They just tackle him down to the floor, and I've grabbed this girl, and I'm walking down the stairs, and I start running towards the ambulance as soon as I get outside, and I'm sprinting towards the ambulance, and I put her down with a medic, and then straight away the paramedics runner, they were asking me to go to the ambulance, get these certain things like, for the drip and other things which I can't even tell you the names for, but I was just trying to be there for her as much as possible, since that guy, when the police came there and we ran and the suspect went down, it was kind of all done then, but the damage had been done.
But you felt compelled to stay and continue to help.
So Martin stayed with the first girl who I pulled out of the car, and then I stayed with the second girl who I took from upstairs. I'm in a mess anyway because of what's just happened, and I'm just thinking, I hope she survives. There was parents coming up to me, like asking me to describing what their kids were wearing that day when they were going into the holiday club, and I just didn't know what to say, and they were asking, is she alive? Is she safe? And just didn't know what to say, and it was horrible. It was really disgusting to kind of be a part of it. But I'm happy that I was there at that time. I just really wish that it didn't happen for a start, or we could have done maybe something more to help.
What was it like as a parent watching other parents come and ask those questions about whether their own children were alive?
Well, this is what I mean. Obviously, just having my baby Avani, like I'm a new dad, and that was one of the hardest things for me when I'm first off seeing these children in that position. These children weren't crying. They were absolutely terrified, if that makes sense. And then when these parents start turning up towards the end, because they're there to pick their children up from a Taylor Swift holiday club, and they're turning up and they're in absolutely hysterics. They're screaming, they're crying. They want to go into the building. They're not allowed to now because it's a crime scene. They're coming asking me for questions and wanting just no information. It's upsetting. It's heartbreaking. It made me feel disgusting. Really upset. But I'm still processing it in my head as well now, because it only happened yesterday. I just feel completely shook up of what's gone on, to be fair. I'm just really upset for all the parents and all the children who had to go through that yesterday. And just makes me want to be a part of some kind of first response unit who's there to help people in that situation straight away. Because when you're in that situation of you're needing someone there with some kind of physicality, some kind of weapon there to defuse the situation, I mean, you need them there instantly. I feel disgusted for the whole situation of what's actually happened. Everyone's being affected by this. It's not just a small thing. I think everyone's going to be affected by this, and the fact that it's all children as well makes the whole situation 1,000 times worse in my eyes. They can't protect themselves at all.
You ran towards danger. Do you consider yourself? I know you probably wouldn't label yourself as such. But you consider yourself a hero. What you did is not.
I know. Honestly, so many people have messaged me saying that. And I'm not going to label myself a hero at all, but I'm not going to label myself a hero at all. I just done what I felt was right in the moment. And in the moment, I was seeing a mixture of red, because I was so angry, and just I need to help these people. So I just done what I felt like I could do, and just everything I could do. That was all I could do. And it's all happened now. And I think back to it, and I think, what if I actually, because we were doing windows, see, what if I ran in and got the pole from the van, and what if I went and done all this? But in the heat of the moment, you can just do what you feel is right. And when I got to that point, when I was on the steps and I looked at him, and I just thought, if I go up there, what's to say there's not another man there? Or what to say that he gets lucky and he gets me, then I've lost my life then. So but that's what I'm questioning in my head now. Maybe if I ran up, things could have been differently. Do you know what I mean? But I'm happy that I've done what I've done, and I'm happy that I've at least managed to, save at least one life, or if not more.
Yeah, there's him feeling guilty. Everyone feeling guilty except the twonk that's responsible. Let's go back to Sky News again.
De Silva Aguiar and 6-year-old BB King, who were killed last summer, are waiting to hear the punishment for their children's killer. We've had a number of victim impact statements this afternoon, including from the girls' dance teacher, Leanne Lucas. She said this: the trauma of being both a victim and a witness has been horrendous. There are times when I will spiral into trauma, and the effect this has had on me, on those close to me, is unforgivable. The impact this has had on me can be summed up by one word: trauma. He targeted us because we were women and girls, vulnerable and easy prey. To discover that he had always set out to hurt the vulnerable is beyond comprehensible. For Alice, Elsie, Bibi, Heidi and the surviving girls, I am surviving for you. Well, those victim impact statements continue to be read out in court this afternoon. You can follow details from Inside Court on skynews.com on our live blog. We're bringing a lot of that detail to you as well. Martin, there is another impact statement that's been read out within the last few minutes from the first child who was attacked on that day.
Yes, another statement read out by the prosecutor. And this is what she says. The young girl says in the statement, "I was thinking I'm going to die. I didn't think I would make it with the amount of blood coming out of me." Very graphic stuff. The prosecutor said she was rushed to hospital where her entire body was in pain. That's a direct quotation. At night, she woke with nightmares and in a panic. The girl says in her statement, "I was scared about what was happening to me in the hospital." She said that she didn't tell her mum what had happened, so that if she died, her mum wouldn't have to live with that knowledge. In public places, she now needs her family to stay safe, and she has nightmares. Another direct quote from this statement: "I think about all the other children that were there, and I feel guilty I wasn't able to help them." So more harrowing details from another victim, a surviving victim of Rudakubana.
Yeah, we've heard that a couple of times now in the victim impact statements, survivor's guilt. Gosh, it's really hard to hear and difficult for them to give those statements, some of them being read out in person, some by lawyers, some by the prosecution team. Away from the victim impact statements this afternoon, we have been learning a lot from the prosecution about Rudakubana. This is essentially a 4 to 6 week trial condensed into a day. So we've had a lot of detail about what happened on the day, what happened in the aftermath, some detail about the police investigation in terms of searching his house, but we've also heard a lot about his background as well, building up a picture of how he got to this point on Hart Street where he attacked young girls and women.
Yes, quite a lot of detail, or at least the moments where there was concern, particularly by the education people, his school people, how he was expelled from school at one point for taking a knife, and how he later admitted that he carried a knife on other occasions, and a lot about his thought processes, and at one point how he called Childline and said that he was worried about what his thoughts were about wanting to kill people.
He said, what would happen if I wanted to kill someone?
Yeah, I mean, and again, some detail about the various organizations and agencies that began to have some dealings with him, but as we've kept saying, it didn't really go any further. And as I said earlier, this isn't somebody who fell through the net. He was caught in the net by all these agencies. And yet, after some initial engagement with him, nothing was done or was able to be done to stop that growing obsession of his with extreme violence that led after 4 or 5 years of these troubling incidents to what happened last July.
I was speaking to Peter Williams, the former Merseyside police inspector, who you know well, now a lecturer at John Moores University, and he described today and what's happened here as a watershed case. What do you think he meant by that, in terms of, you talked about Rudakubana being caught in the net? He was, he was known to so many authorities and organisations, but it seems like we're getting a sense that nobody quite knew what to do with him because he didn't fit in the parameters of their organisation. Prevent, for example, he wasn't seen as being at risk of being radicalised. He wasn't seen as a terrorist threat, but he was a young man with violent tendencies and an obsession with violence. Is that what he meant by this being a watershed moment, in terms of being able to look at a case like this, at all of the background, and go, this could potentially be a problem?
I think what he means is that it's had such wide publicity and prompted such widespread public concern that it has led to all number of inquiries that are going on, not least the public inquiry ordered by the Home Secretary, but, you know, reviews of the contempt laws about what can be said, you know, ahead of a trial, a review of the prevent system, and there's a Lancashire safeguarding partnership review about all those various individual engagements with Rudakubana by the different agencies. That
could be done better.
Surely something will emerge that will perhaps provide guidelines for people like him. And as the Prime Minister said a couple of days ago, we have to recognise that, you know, there is a growing threat from these, what he called young misfits, sitting alone in their bedrooms, going on the internet, becoming not radicalized in the traditional terrorist nature, but becoming obsessed, as Rudakubana was, by extreme violence. And the images that he was able to see, images of genocide and mass school shootings and so forth. And I think what Peter, the former police officer, was suggesting was that this is now being explored by so many different people that surely that kind of guideline on how to deal with this emerging threat of these misfits, that there will be guidelines that will teach those agencies whose job it is to engage with them, they will know how to deal better with them in the future.
Martin, thank you for the moment. Just hearing from our colleagues inside court that they believe they are on the last victim impact statement now. And remind us what will happen after that concludes, Martin.
We'll hear from the defence. I don't know how long that's going to be, but it's the defence's opportunity to mitigate, to ask for a bit of mercy, if you like, from the judge, but difficult to see that there's going to be any mercy. Rudakubana is going to be given a number of life sentences, certainly 3 for the 3 murders he's admitted, perhaps another 10 for the attempted murders, and a very, very long minimum jail sentence before which he can, you know, have any hope of applying for parole. I mean, this is a young man who is going to prison for dozens of years and may never be released.
Okay, Martin, thank you. Just hearing from inside court that the victim impact statement part of proceedings has now come to an end. Stay with us here on Sky News. We'll bring you the latest from inside court in a few moments' time.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African.
Yeah, it seems ridiculous, doesn't it? That what's the defence going to say? There is no defence. There is no defence whatsoever. Anyway, he's pled guilty, but there are no what are the mitigating circumstances could there be? It's impossible, isn't it? What mitigating circumstances can there possibly be in this situation? There just aren't any, are there? So let's just look at the last couple of impact statements. So the mother of one of the surviving children, child A, because the surviving children can't be named, is now sharing some thoughts from her daughter. Child A thought the attack was a prank, and when Axel Rudakuna approached her with the knife, she told him she didn't want one. She didn't want to play, and Rudakubana then attacked her. Our world collapsed in that moment, and we're still trying to rebuild it, the girl's mother says. And when the girl woke up from surgery, she lunged forward and reached her arms out, reaching for her best friend, still believing she was in danger, trying to get to her. They were separated in the most terrifying way, her mother adds. Then another survivor, another of the surviving children, gave a statement. I first thought that the man who stabbed me was a cleaner. And when I saw him and what was happening, I thought it was a prank. I realised it wasn't a prank when I saw blood coming out of me. I remember everything being fuzzy, and everything that was going through my mind was about my family and friends. I was thinking, I don't want to die. I've got to get out of here. I was so scared and worried, but there are no words really to describe what happened on that day. God. And then the last one, I think this is the last one. Survivors' parents say, these are two sisters that were there and they both survived. And here's some of what the court heard. It was the worst day of our lives. Both our daughters suffered horrendous injuries. The girls are resilient, but the injuries they sustained still affect them. Since the incident, the girls can't be alone. They don't leave their parents' side. They sleep with their parents. They're unable to walk to school without feeling scared. I'm surprised they can even get to school. They won't get out of the car if it's dark outside. Any slight noise can alarm them. They struggle with simple things that weren't a problem before, like taking a shower and brushing their teeth. It's like having babies again. God. Awful, isn't it? Now, I think the impact statements have finished now. Now, whether they'll have a break now or whether the defence, whatever the defence are going to say, I can't imagine. What are the defence going to say? What can they possibly say? Let's have a look. What?
She adds that one of her children has become extremely self-conscious because of the scars that have been left on her body. And she has caught her crying about the way she looks.
Oh. Oh, she's upset. Oh, look.
Excuse me, just one moment.
Oh.
She said
Not
it didn't cross
often
her
the
mind that we should
reporters
be
get-
worried, we feel helpless, and we feel guilty. We have to live with the guilt that we sent our children to that event on that day. Oh, it's been a hard afternoon
Oh,
for everyone involved here. I'm going to bring in the Archbishop of Liverpool, Malcolm McMahon, to find some words just to sort of try and get your head around what is happening here today, because it's really hard to hear about those lives changing on that day, and we're not even 6 months on from what happened.
Yes, sometimes we just can't find words to comfort us, to explain, or in any way to rationalize or support our thoughts in when we're confronted with such an atrocity and a tragedy. And my thoughts at the moment are for the grieving parents. There are so many grieving parents, not just the parents of Alice and of Elsie Dot and of Bibi, but also the other parents whose children were at that dance class. So my thoughts are with them at this time. And I hope that the community, the faith community and the Christian community can stay together in the way in which they've come together in the face of this appalling series of events, and offer support and comfort.
When I was in Southport that week, the community came out onto the streets. I was on Hart Street where the attack took place, and people didn't know in the immediate aftermath what to do, what to say. They just knew that they had to go somewhere to be with other people. The sense of community came to that point on Hart Street, the floral tributes, and a number of faith groups, different faith groups came out to offer support and open their doors. And their message was, regardless of what your faith is, there is a place for you and we will offer support. And I feel that just wasn't faith groups, that was the community of Southport as a whole. In fact, Merseyside.
Yes.
And that often happens under tragic circumstances,
It
isn't
does.
it?
I think
From the worst comes the best.
It does. It's sad that it takes takes the tragedy for the good to come out. But I must say that in this part of the world, and you can tell from my accent, I'm not a native up here, but I've worked here for some years now. And there is this openness to, which all the communities embrace. And we do work together so well, we live together so well, no matter what our backgrounds or our religions. And that openness, I think, is going to be part of the solution to this tragedy. It will take years, though, because the grief which has descended on us all will remain for a long time.
We talk about healing, don't we, after something like this happens? And speaking to members of the community in Southport this week, they have said that the healing won't really start to begin until after this part is over, because this is reliving the events of that summer, and they knew this was going to be difficult. But after sentencing today, they can start. How do you start to heal from something like this, whether you are a parent of a child that was attacked or in the community? Because everybody knows everyone in Southport, everybody knows somebody affected, those people that were living on the street that day, everybody has been touched by this. Where do you begin?
I think you begin by just being with other people. You don't, as I was saying at the beginning, you don't really have to say anything. You've got to be there for people. It means small acts of kindness. It means being welcoming. It means taking time with people, sometimes just sitting with people who are hurt and bereaved. That's the way in which we heal each other.
Have you noticed people wanting to talk to you about what has happened, even those completely unconnected by the events? Because everybody's finding this difficult. There's something particularly heinous about a crime committed against young children, young girls, and vulnerable women. And people put themselves in those shoes because so many people have families. And it is that case of, what if this was such a random attack? You know, people drop their kids off at a half-term summer camp all the time, and it's the what if. It's hard for people to comprehend. So have you noticed that people are wanting to talk about this, because it is the unfathomable that came to Southport that day?
Yes, people were putting their children in what they considered to be not just an enjoyable and creative space, but also a safe space, and that turned out not to be the case. And so the people will blame themselves, but of course they have nothing really to blame themselves for. But those circumstances, I think, are so rare that we shouldn't let them dominate either. We mustn't keep our children in and not go out to events and not go out to meet others during holidays, to be children, really. If we do that, then somehow we've lost, and we are, we are really the people who have given in to the appalling events that took place.
Archbishop Malcolm McMahon, Archbishop of Liverpool, thank you so much for your time here on Sky News and coming down to see us. Thank you for finding some words. It's difficult to sort of...
Yes, I appreciate what you've said. And but, I'm so proud of our community, the wider community in Southport, which is in my diocese. Not just the Catholic communities, their schools and their churches, their openness, their priests, all of that. But look, the big community up there is something that we should all be very proud of.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, grateful. And just a final reflection on what happens after today, because as we've been reflecting on all day, people did expect this to be a long, arduous trial with many days of harrowing evidence that would last 4 to 6 weeks. It's being wrapped up inside a week, mainly today, a really intense day for those people inside that court. Just a final reflection of what life looks like for those people now after this.
I think it's a small mercy that we've had today, in that we've only had this really one day of going back over the horror. I think the future is about small steps, about slowly building up again, about coming together in prayer and in community. And I don't think this will disappear from people's minds. In the Southport area, it has changed the way in which people relate to each other and changed it for the good. And so that's another small mercy.
Archbishop of Liverpool, Malcolm McMahon, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and thank you for your words. Thank you.
For asking.
Well, court proceedings are still underway. Victim impacts have finished for the day now. The prosecution has also finished its part in today's proceedings. The defence team for Axel Rudakubana now making its submissions, as our crime correspondent Martin Brunt was saying. They will be trying to put forward any mitigating circumstances to the judge for the actions of Axel Rudakubana. That may be taken into account in his sentencing a little later on. But the prosecution submission's now complete. The defence case now beginning, but it should be very brief. We understand the defence saying that the most significant mitigating factor was that he was just 17 years of age when he committed the offence, but also evidence suggesting his maturity did not match his chronological age. More details emerging from inside that courtroom all the time. We'll keep right up to date here on Sky News. It is 4 o'clock. We're live at Liverpool Crown Court. We have been here since this morning following events in this sentencing hearing for the man who killed 3 young girls at that dance class in Southport last year. It continues. Rudakubana has been ordered to leave the courtroom by the judge twice today. It happened once this morning, just a few minutes into the start of proceedings, and once again this afternoon. He began shouting over proceedings, claiming he felt unwell. The judge ordered him out. A family member of one of the victims yelling "coward" at him as he was taken from the room. Before that happened, Rudakubana had arrived here in court in a prison van. He walked into the courtroom, we understand, wearing a grey tracksuit and face mask. He then sat in a dock with his head in his lap. Earlier this week, on Monday, he pleaded guilty. We can now go live inside court for sentencing. I understand the judge's remarks. Let's listen in.
Oh, God, there you go.
During the sentence hearing, Axel Rudakubana was determined to disrupt the proceedings so that he would not have to face the victims of his crimes and justice. I was required to have him removed from court, not because that is what he wanted, but he was preventing the hearing from being held in the normal way. Accordingly, I passed sentence in his voluntary absence, whilst his counsel, both leading and junior, and solicitor are present in court. On the 29th of July last year, Rudakubana left home and travelled by taxi to the Hart Space in Hart Street, Southport, armed with a large kitchen knife, which he had bought on the internet on the 13th of July, 16 days earlier. He knew that there was to be a Taylor Swift-themed yoga and dance workshop where very young girls, mostly aged between 6 and 11, were to enjoy an organised party safely in an upstairs room where the organisers were to look after him. There were 26 children in the party, all of them happy and enjoying themselves. It started at about 9:30 that morning on a warm summer's day, but he had targeted those very young children for the horrific he was intent upon. At 11:45 that morning, he arrived and walked straight into the building, up the stairs to where he could hear the sound of happy children. In his mind was the intention to murder as many of them as he physically could. He wanted to try and carry out mass murder of innocent, happy young girls. And over about 15 minutes, he savagely killed 3 of them and attempted to kill 8 more, as well as 2 adults who tried to stop him. It was of such extreme violence, of the utmost and exceptionally high seriousness, that it is difficult to comprehend why it was done. I'm sure that Rudakubana had a settled and determined intention to carry out these offences, and that had he been able to, he would have killed each and every child, all 26 of them, as well as any adults who got in his way. It was only because some managed to escape that prevented many more from being murdered. I'm also sure that after the other children, 8 of whom he had very seriously injured, managed to escape, It left him in the upstairs room and landing, where he returned to continue his sustained and brutal violence against two of the youngest of those children, stabbing them multiple times. That demonstrated how determined he was to cause the maximum suffering he could. Left alone with them where they'd fallen, he continued shocking and extreme violence. Many who have heard the evidence summarized by the prosecution in this hearing, and having seen the CCTV recordings played with a view from the outside of the building, might describe what he did as evil. Who could dispute it? But on any view, it was at least the most extreme, shocking, and exceptionally serious crime. In describing the injuries caused to each of the victims, I will summarize the evidence, being conscious that the families of Elsie Stankham, B.B. King, and Alice De Silva Aguiar are in court, as are the families of each of the other victims. It's necessary, however, in sentencing, briefly to refer to the injuries. Elsie Stankham was aged only 7 when Rudakubana inflicted at least 85 sharp force injuries to her head, face, neck, torso, and upper limbs. Severe force was used to cause her death. B.B. King was aged only 6 when he inflicted at least 122 sharp force injuries to her head, face, neck, torso, and upper limbs. It was the opinion of Dr. Seeker, the pathologist, that Rudakubana had tried to decapitate her. He concluded that severe force was used to kill her. Alice De Silva Aguiar was aged 9 when he stabbed her, including a chop wound to her head and 4 stab wounds to her back, causing substantial internal injury. Although she managed to escape out of the building, she collapsed, and despite all medical help, she died in hospital at 1:20 in the morning the following day.
We are just listening to the judge's remarks ahead of the sentencing of Axel Rudakubana. Some really distressing details heard there inside court about the injuries inflicted on the 3 girls who were killed by Rudakubana that day in July. The judge saying that the evidence seen in court today, alongside CCTV, he said that he couldn't dispute anyone calling him evil. He said that he didn't doubt the intent of Axel Rudakubana that day was to kill all 26 people inside that dance class. Martin, we knew the detail would be distressing. It's been distressing all day. And the judge there saying that he is being respectful of the families in the courtroom as to what level of detail he can say, but still going to that level of detail. One of the girls, BB, 122 injuries. This is just horrific.
It's extraordinary. It's the first time I knew the extent of the number of injuries, and not just in one case, in at least 2 of those fatal cases. He said Rudakubana, in the view of the judge, was determined to cause the maximum suffering. And he said that it's understandable that many of those who've heard what the prosecutor has said and has watched that CCTV images of Rudakubana on the day might call this evil. And the judge said, it's very difficult to argue with that case. I think we're dipping in and out of what the judge is saying.
And we haven't got the feed at the moment, Martin, so we'll keep talking. We won't dwell on those injuries. The judge has said it. That is out there. That's not something to dwell on at the moment out of respect for the families. But the judge obviously going to that level of detail just to outline the horror of that day, because these judges' remarks are part of his explanation as to the sentencing to come, which comes at the end of these remarks. We did hear from the defence, which he said would be brief, and it was. Not much detail coming out from them. Mitigating circumstances they were there to outline. They said the most significant factor was the fact that he was just 17. We've got the live feedback. Let's listen in.
Rudakubana attacked her also. She did all she could before escaping, but suffered 5 stab wounds to her head, neck, back, shoulder blade and arm. She required a blood transfusion. She also suffered fractures to a spinal vertebrae, a rib, a shoulder blade, and all caused by severe force. And Jonathan Hayes was an adult working in a different part of the upstairs to the building. After he heard the disturbance, he went up and was attacked with a knife. Rudakubana stabbed him in the leg, causing a deep wound as he tried to kill him. He was only saved when another witness appeared. I have read each of the victim's personal statements, and many have been read out to the court. They are all deeply moving. The harm that Rudakubana has caused to each family, each child, and to the community has been profound and permanent. For the families of Elsie, Bibi, and Alice, they will never recover from what happened to their daughter. For those children and the adults that he attempted to murder, their lives will never be the same, nor will their families who are left to look after their exceptionally brave daughters. Also for the emergency services whose personnel had to deal with the aftermath. In just under 15 minutes, Rudakubana murdered 3 children, attempted to murder 8 other children, and also 2 adults. He was prevented from murdering more only by the escape of the other children. When the police arrived at about 12 noon, they found him standing over the body of B.B. King and still holding the knife. It was B.B. who had suffered at least 122 separate knife wounds. He was arrested, taken into custody, and whilst Rudakubana did not say anything in his police interviews, he did make unsolicited comments which are deeply disturbing, including, quote, "I'm glad to see those kids are dead. It makes me happy," close quote. And, quote, "It's a good thing those children are dead," close quote. In his home, the police discovered clear evidence of a settled intention to carry out mass killing. On one of his computers were files proving that he had a long-standing preoccupation with violent killing and genocide. Of particular significance were copies of an Al-Qaeda training manual, which described methods of killing with a knife and where to attack the victim. Part of it referred to attacking the head and neck, just as he had done to some of the victims in this case. Also, the manual provided instruction on how to produce ricin, a highly dangerous toxin, which can cause multiple deaths and has no known antidote. I am sure that he had followed those instructions because the police found in his bedroom the materials to produce ricin and a pulp residue within a container. That was examined by an expert in chemical and biological warfare agents, Dr. Martin Pierce, and confirmed it was ricin pulp and castor oil. His opinion was that there was sufficient ricin pulp that with some further purification process, it would have provided a range of up to 1,269 doses, which would cause death if inhaled. However, there was no evidence that Rudakubana had recently tried purification. I am satisfied that for some time, he had planned to kill as many people as he could, as the prosecution have called it, quotes, a mass killing. He bought the knife he wanted to use, which had a particularly sharp point. He had read information on how to stab people with greatest effect to kill them. He saw the publicity for a children's party in Southport at the Heart Space Dance Studio and decided to kill as many as he could, targeting very young children. I'm also satisfied that if he hadn't decided that way of killing, in time, he was highly likely to use the ricin he had produced. The prosecution have made it clear that these proceedings were not acts of terrorism within the meaning of the terrorism legislation, because there is no evidence that Rudakubana's purpose was to advance political, religious, racial, or ideological cause. I must accept that conclusion. However, in my judgment, his culpability for this extreme level of violence is equivalent in its seriousness to terrorist murders, whatever his purpose. Whether his motivation was for terrorism or not misses the point. What he did on the 29th of July last year has caused such shock and revulsion to the whole nation that it must be viewed as being at the very extreme level of crime. His culpability and the harm he caused and intended were at the highest. I do not, however, take into account against him what happened in different parts of the country after his arrest. He did not cause that. Axel Rudakubana was born in Cardiff on the 7th of August of 2006. He's a UK citizen, now aged 18, but was still 17 when he committed these offences. He was only 9 days short of his 18th birthday, which has a particular significance. Had he been 18, I make it clear that I would have been compelled to impose on him life imprisonment without a minimum term, otherwise known as a whole life term, meaning that he would never be released. However, the law does not permit such a sentence for those offenders who are under 18 when they offend. Rudakubana has only one previous conviction on the 19th of February 2020 when he was aged 13 for possession of a knife on school premises, assault and possession of an offensive weapon in a public place. He was made subject to a juvenile referral order. Those offences took place when he returned to the school from which he'd been excluded due to his previous behaviour. He entered the school without permission, carrying a knife and hockey stick, intent on attacking another pupil, whom he said had bullied him. For the offence of murder on counts 1, 2, and 3, the sentence must be custody for life. I'm required to fix the minimum term which he must serve in custody before he may apply to the parole board for his release. It will be for the board to decide if he is ever safe to be released into the community. And if ever he is, he will remain on licence for the rest of his life, subject to recall into custody if he breaches his licence terms. The minimum term I will fix will be a very substantial one, and the very least he will be detained, which will mean that he will serve almost the whole of his life in custody. I consider at this time that it is likely he will never be released and that he will be in custody for all his life. The starting point in deciding the minimum term in custody on counts 1 to 3 must be 27 years because he was 17 years old when he murdered Elsie, Bibi and Alice. I find the following circumstances make those murders yet more serious. Firstly, there are 2 exceptionally high factors that would, but for his age, require me to impose a whole life term. The murder of 2 or more persons where each murder involved a substantial degree of premeditation or planning, and it was in each case the murder of a child with such premeditation or planning. Secondly, the children were particularly vulnerable because of their very young age, being 7, 6 and 9 respectively. Thirdly, the physical suffering that he caused as he repeatedly stabbed them. Fourthly, there were 3 murders. Fifthly, at the time he carried out these murders, he also attempted to kill 10 more, 8 of whom were also very young children. Sixthly, the severity of the injuries caused to the victims. Seventhly, he produced highly toxic poison ricin, which he was very likely to use at some time had he not committed these offences. In mitigation for this offending, Rudakubana is still only 18 years old. However, I consider that his age has already provided him with a substantial reduction in his sentence because it means that he has avoided a whole life term. Whilst he has entered guilty pleas, saving the families and victims the pain of a trial, he cannot claim to have shown any remorse. His unsolicited comments in the police station made clear his feelings. However, lack of remorse is not an aggravating factor. I have read evidence within a statement of an assistant head teacher which describes how Rudakubana's early years at school developed from a normal student to one who became increasingly threatening to those he felt had wronged him, leading to his exclusion. None of this gives any indication of what he was to do on the 29th of July last year. I have read the intermediary assessment report dated the 24th of September 2024, in which its author said that he presented as having high-functioning autism and that he does not have any associated learning disabilities. The report found that he had some communication and attention difficulties. None of this offered any explanation for this offending. No further expert evidence has been provided on his behalf. I've taken into account the overarching principles sentencing children and young people. The fact that he's now 18 years old does not make the guideline irrelevant. However, I'm not persuaded that his emotional age is different to his chronological age. I will give him the appropriate discount to reflect the fact that whilst almost 18, he was still young. In sentencing, I will impose concurrent sentences, meaning they will all be served at the same time. However, I will treat the murder offences in counts 1 to 3 as the lead offences and take into account all of the total offending when fixing the minimum term of custody he must serve. Also, I have in mind the totality of the sentences, requiring me to take a step back and consider whether they're just and proportionate, and I conclude that they are. The guilty pleas will allow some small discount on the sentence because they were entered so late on the first day of the trial. I turn to the attempted murder offences in counts 4 to 13. Each of these offences requires me to impose concurrent sentences of custody for life under section 272 of the Sentencing Act 2020. Each offence is within Schedule 19 of the Act. I'm satisfied in the circumstances of these offences that Rudakubana is a dangerous offender and that the circumstances justify the imposition of a life sentence. I must then fix the custodial term which he must serve. For each of the offences where he attempted to murder a child, being counts 4 to 11, the appropriate sentence guideline is category A2 with a starting point for sentence of 30 years and a range up to 35 years. The very young age of each victim and the substantial planning by him requires me to increase that sentence to the top of the range before reducing it to reflect his age, his late guilty plea, and to reach the minimum term for these offences. Accordingly, I firstly reduced the sentence to 30 years for his age and 27 years for the guilty plea, leading to a minimum term of 18 years on each of counts 4 to 11 concurrently. On counts 12 and 13, which are attempted murder of the adults, Leanne Lucas and Johnson Hayes, the guideline category is B2 with a starting point of 25 years and a range up to 30 years. With the same aggravating factors of seriousness and mitigation for counts 4 to 11, I increased the sentence to 30 years before reducing it to 27 years for age and to 24 years for guilty plea, leading to a minimum term on those two counts of 16 years concurrently. I now turn to the remaining counts. On count 14, having an article with a blade, the sentence is 18 months custody. This is a category 1A offence for which I have reduced the sentence to reflect his age and plea. Count 15, production of a biological toxin. There is no offence-specific sentence guideline. I've been assisted by reference to the case of the Crown against Mohammed Ammar Ali, 2016 EWCA Crim 864, in which a sentence of 8 years imprisonment after conviction was upheld by the Court of Appeal, the decision based upon its own facts. I'm satisfied that his production in this case of ricin was more advanced and is associated with Rudakubana's mindset to cause many killings, whilst he had not used the ricin by the time of his arrest, taking into account his culpability and the harm risked, allowing for his age and guilty plea, I sentence him concurrently to 12 years custody. Count 16, possession of a document likely to be useful to a person preparing an act of terrorism. The sentence is 18 months custody after taking into account his age and plea and applying the guideline category 3C. I'm now going to sentence Axel Rudakuna, having explained my reasons. On counts 1 to 3 murder, I sentence him to custody for life with a minimum term which he must serve in custody of 52 years, less the time he's served already. He's been in custody for 175 days on remand, which will be credited. Therefore, the minimum term is 51 years and 190 days. On counts 4 to 11, I sentence him concurrently to custody for life with a minimum term of 18 years, less 175 days served. on each count concurrently with each other. Allowing for his time served on remand, the minimum term on those counts is 17 years and 190 days. On counts 12 and 13, I sentence him concurrently to custody for life with a minimum term of 16 years, less his time served on remand, on each count concurrently with each other, leading to a minimum term on those counts of 15 years and 190 days. On counts 14 and 16, I sentence him to 18 months custody concurrently with each other and all other offences. He will pay the appropriate amount under he will pay the appropriate amount under 18 statutory charge, which will be entered on the court record. Accordingly, in total, I sentence Rudakubana to 13 sentences of custody for life and a minimum term to be served in custody of 51 days and 190 days. It is highly likely that he will never be released.
The judge there in this case delivering his remarks and the sentencing of Axel Rudakubana live there with our cameras in court. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt joins me now to talk us through sentencing.
Yes, well, that's a huge sentence, but I suppose not unanticipated.
A minimum of 52 years.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, weren't we, of maybe 30, maybe 40. I think I probably, well, clearly I'd underestimated it.
You did say that there had been a precedent, though, for a 50-year sentence.
Yes, I think it's not the first time that somebody's been subjected to a minimum term. That means that he'll be 70 by the time he gets the first opportunity to ask for parole. And of course, there's no guarantee that he'd be granted parole. That would very much depend on the assessment by psychiatrists about whether he's free, whether he's presenting such a low risk that, it would be safe to release him into the public.
Okay, now, sorry, hang on. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know why you can't see me there. Why can't you see me? Anyway, there I am. So, yeah, a good sentence, a very good sentence. I knew as soon as that judge started, because he said he couldn't give him a whole life tariff because of his age. But he said, I'm going to give him a sentence that means he's likely to serve a whole life. He said that right at the beginning, didn't he? And so you knew it was going to be a big sentence then. I was thinking then it must be 50 years because he said straight away he can't give him a whole life sentence, but he intended to give him a sentence, which would ensure that he was likely to serve his whole life in prison. So, of course, he is so very young, 18. When he gets considered for parole in 51 years, he will be 69. He'll still have a chance, I suppose, at a bit of. He's not going to get let out. He won't even want to come out by then. What's he going to do after he's spent 51 years in prison? What's he going to do? Come out? His parents will be deceased. He won't have lived in society for all those years. He isn't even going to want to come out by then, is he? So that's it. It's a whole life tariff without being called a whole life tariff, really, isn't it? So you can see me now, can't you? I think you can see me now. So anyway, that's the result, and I hope that brings the family some, resolution, some satisfaction. It doesn't bring their little girls back. But I think, that was just brutal. That, thank goodness he did plead guilty. That's really the only extenuating circumstance, is that he pled guilty, because what we've just had to go through, it was hard to sort of listen to it all in one day, and I expect it was hard for the families. But imagine that over a couple of weeks, day in, day out, going through all those details, more details, witnesses, You know, him insisting maybe every day that he's ill and, you know, he needs a paramedic and all that shite that they had to put up with. Imagine that over a few weeks. At least it's one day. It's a horrible day. It's been a difficult day, a painful day for everyone, even the reporter, Sarah J. Mee, even she was upset, wasn't she? But it's over. It's over. He's been sentenced. You know, I hope he finds some sort of, I don't know, what they're going to do with him. You know, an 18-year-old going to prison now for all that time. What are they going to do with him? Anyway, I don't really care. I don't care about him. I hope I never have to see his face again. I hope that a day comes maybe where he does feel that he feels remorse and he can, you know, say he's sorry or feel something. You know, that boy, he is possessed by the devil one way or another, because nobody, they say he's got no mental health issues, but, you know, I mean, that is not somebody right, is it, that can do that kind of thing that he did and not feel any remorse. That's not somebody with normal mental health. He maybe doesn't have any sort of classical sort of mental health issues, but he's definitely not 100%, is he? But yeah, good judges, a good judge, a good sentence. We've seen a couple of good sentences lately. I hope that continues. I hope that's a trend, you know, because we had a trend from the 80s, wasn't it? 80s, 90s, low sentences, you know, thinking that people could be rehabilitated. Some people can't be rehabilitated. Some people can. It depends on the offence. There are people that go in and can be rehabilitated. I know that. But not people who do things like this. How can you be rehabilitated? How can he even walk amongst society ever again? Because people knowing what he's done. And, you know, some killers cannot be rehabilitated, in my opinion. Oh, here's the dog. Yeah, so it is a good sentence. And it'll be some comfort, I suppose, at least to the family, better than, you know, think that case I was telling you about in Spain where that girl got murdered and her killer was out 4 years later. 4 years. Anyway, I mean, it wasn't like what Axel had done, but even so. Anyway, so it's a good sentence. I hope that's a trend in Britain now, that these judges now that are coming through are going to be stricter and give better sentences. But yeah, I think we approve of the judge, don't we? We approve of the judge. There'll be people out there that might have cases coming up where he's going to be the judge on their case. They'll be shitting themselves. They'll be like, oh my God, he'll be that judge that nobody wants. Well, he'll be JBT tuna all around in the block tonight. Yeah. What's for dinner? Tuna bake tonight. Tuna bake. I wonder if he'll go to Belmarsh where Irfan is. They have to put him and Irfan in a cell together because they're the only people that'll speak to each other. Do you know? Like they'll probably have them sharing the cell. It's like, you know. Anyway, he's got a long way to go. He probably will not come out of there alive in prison. But having said that, he'll have all his needs met for the rest of his life, won't he? He won't have to worry about bills. He'll get fed 3 times a day if he chooses to. Well, tuna anyway. Get tuna anytime you want it, isn't it? It's like, oh, what do you find? What's on the menu tonight? Oh, tuna? You want tuna? Nobody's eating tuna anymore at that prison. I bet they're all Irfan's going, oh, tuna's against my religion. You know, it's like nobody wants to have tuna. It's too dangerous. I mean, what are they going to do about that? I mean, they can't stop tuna coming in cans, can they? So I expect that's caused, though I still think maybe the prison officers, you know, the prison officers, sometimes I think they turn a blind eye to things, don't they? Anyway, that's Axel. Now, I'm going to spare a thought for his family, though I expect they're relieved. you know, that he's going to prison for the rest of his life. They've had 4 years of hell with him, probably, him threatening their lives, you know, them worrying about him, not knowing what to do with him, and then him doing that. And now they've had to move out of their home because they're not safe. They're under police guard. So for his family, that it'd probably be a bit of a relief for them, because they know he's still their son, but he's being looked after now, you know, and they don't have to look after him, and they don't have to, you know, be phoning the police about him or worrying if he's going to murder them in the middle of the night. I expect that's what it's been like in that household. So spare a thought for them as well. Anyway. So, right, thanks for being with me. I've got to go and pick up now. It's members live tonight, and I'm a bit exhausted, to be honest, but I think I will still do the members live, but it'll be a short one. I've got some news for you. I've been contacted. I'm going to go through it. There's a documentary coming up on Amazon Prime about Nicola Bulley, and I've been contacted about it, and I'm going to tell the members about it tonight. So look forward to that. I'll say it won't be a long live, but about an hour, just to let you know what this email is I've received, and see what you think. I know what I think, but yeah, there's a new documentary coming out on Amazon Prime about Nicola Bulley and the impact of social media on criminal investigations. You know how they love to talk about that. So anyway, we'll be talking about that later tonight. But in the end, a good result. Thank you so much for being with me through that, because that was tough, wasn't it? That was tough for all of us. God knows how it was for these girls' families. But I hope they can rest a little bit more in peace now, knowing that that horrible, evil man who took their lives away, you know, descended on what should have been a fun day. You know, God, they would have been so looking forward to that, wouldn't they? Dancing, singing, Taylor Swift, etc. Would have been so, you know, it should have been such a lovely day, and anyway, it wasn't. So I'll see you really soon in the next video. If you remember, I'll see you later on today to talk about this Nicola Bulley documentary. And anyway, until I see you again, may your God go with you. Thank you. Bye.